green.
That means we're live, pal. Can you
so.
kill the sound of the heater?
I can kill it with my mind.
So we're live, pal. Love and Jokes Podcast, episode 139. I'm sitting across from my brother. And that's a phrase that jiu-jitsu guys love to fucking use. They'll be like, I'm sitting across here from my brother, guys. We're both from Iowa. That's a common thing in jiu-jitsu. Here's my brojinho. We both raised in South Carolina by white mothers. Somehow, I'm a blue belchy with this accent. This is my literal brother, Devin. Devin has a wide set of interests. There's so many things I want to talk to this guy about. We don't spend that much time together.
Yeah, that's true. Holidays.
So we always say like, all right, man, I'll see you at that holiday. And it's always interesting and fun to talk to him. But that's usually what our conversations are reserved for. And never have they been fucking recorded.
No. Which is usually a good
also
idea.
not broadcasted out live
usually
on the
that's a good
internet.
thing. Right on.
But we're going to go in. And frankly, I think he's kind of brave for doing it. I think anybody that has some points of view that could be called extreme, that's willing to share those points of views in a public forum, should already just be commended. Like, the last time I had a person on the podcast that I thought had a point of view that might be separate from everybody else's was Dan Swift.
Yeah, that's true.
And that, as far as YouTube is concerned, is our most popular podcast.
Yeah.
Audio-wise, it could be something else. I don't know. But
something with Big J.
he's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he is.
But I'm sitting across from my brother, my brojinho. I don't fucking talk like that. just so we're clear.
I hope this is just for the introduction.
I'm absolutely like, I'm the least Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy you'll ever fucking meet.
Right on.
Like, I don't have a hard-on for that country. Why would I want to have a hard-on for another third world country where I am also a nigger? That just doesn't make any sense to me. Anthony, hit my motherfucking music. Yes. Episode 139 of the Love and Jokes Podcast. It is I, your boy, Young Keeb, Coach Keeb, a.k.a. But that's what the champ calls me. The champ renamed me. I am now known as Young Coach Marble Butt. You can judge me if you want. I don't give a fuck. I didn't give myself the nickname Keebler, and it stuck. And if Marble Butt sticks, then so be it. All you motherfuckers out here trying to write your own narratives, trying to shape your own shit like you do on social media, you bunch of fucking marks. We know what you really like. Just because you got a nice booty and 100 Instagram followers, we know what your apartment looked like, ho. You're not tricking anyone. Certainly not anyone over the age of 30. Anthony, I think it's time that we begin the show.
Okay.
So, Anthony, you've met my brother for a few minutes now.
Yes, I have. Yes, it's like seeing some similarities already, like very softer voices. That's it. Like you have a softer speaking voice, not like a showman voice. So
Yeah.
you see, differences is that he sounds like he's from a different country. He sounds like he's like straight out of like the motherland.
That's the motherland coming straight out of me.
There you go. I can definitely tell that he was probably the more orderly one, and you're the more rowdy one, just because it seems like he just has more order than you do.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
And then I imagine there's a lot of fighting, just because that's what brothers do.
There was a lot of fighting.
Yeah.
And then it kind of stopped.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like there was a point where it was like all the time, and I always lost,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I always started it too. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Always.
See, here's the thing, like, I was such a fucking asshole all the time. Like, all the time. And, see, just an agree. Yes, I was there. Yes.
I was there.
But people don't believe that. Like, they're like, no, not you. And I'm like, yeah, me. Like, it's taken a decent amount of getting my ass kicked and being choked out and being scared and losing things and losing matches and losing businesses to start to become a decent human being. To try to actually be decent. And for me, it's kind of hard. Because it is not my default setting.
No.
My default setting is burn everything. That's my default setting. And now I'm actually on the podcast with someone who knows that to be true.
That's correct. Why do we have a random Xbox controller?
Well, there's a random Xbox over there.
Oh, so it's not random at all. It's connected to the Xbox.
We don't need it for
I was
today's
just like,
podcast. But
Does this control something?
look, man, sometimes when I'm lonely, I come
You
down
play
here
Xbox? Maybe I'll get an
in the
Xbox.
studio,
I don't.
kill some zombies for a little while right here.
Right on.
Little Left 4 Dead 2.
Right on. I don't know what that is.
It's an Xbox 360 game that I still fuck with.
Okay. Right on.
So what is the worst thing Darren has done as a child?
Whoa.
Whoa.
I must know now.
We're going straight
Damn.
into the worst.
know
Anthony
right now.
wants the
I
fucking
wanna know
blood.
right now.
What is the worst thing? There's so many horrible things.
Yeah, it's gotta be top 5.
I don't know. Top 5, maybe. I
Top
would
5
say
dead or alive.
The worst thing that he did as a child. Maybe he threw my sister and he threw our sister in the garbage when she came home from
How's
the
his
hospital.
audio?
It's a little low.
Okay, we can
Let's
pick
fix
that
that.
up. We can pick it up.
Put up as high as I could.
There we go.
Make it
All right,
easy.
no. So the worst thing that Darren probably did, and I'm sure he's okay with us
Just
talking
go. I
about
don't
it,
give a fuck.
you know, is that so my sister Darren is the older brother. I'm 18 months younger than Darren, and then our sister is a couple years younger than me. And so
Wait, Darren's the older brother?
Darren's
Yeah.
the older brother.
Oh man, you guys are already screwed.
Darren is the big brother in this
That's right.
situation,
I was
right?
hoping you'd be the big brother.
No. No, Darren was the older brother. And so my sister came home from the hospital, and she's, a baby. And my brother takes the baby and puts the baby in the garbage because he doesn't want another sibling. He doesn't want a sister. So he's just a little kid, but he's old enough to know that the trash is not where you put babies, right? And
But
he
if
put
it's a baby
our
you
sister
don't want,
in the garbage because he did in the literal trash can because he didn't want a sister. Yeah, so that was horrible.
yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, I think we talked about the football story where we were
That
playing.
one I don't think I've ever.
Yeah,
actually
so we
heard.
were playing football at my aunt's house. I thought we were just playing a friendly game of football, because that's what brothers do when they're around the same age. And for some reason, so I tackled Darren, which occurs when you play football. It's just a
Does.
natural part of the game. People
It's
get
normal.
tackled. And Darren just jumps up. And Darren was really fast, right? He was quick reflexes, right?
Yeah.
What's that shit that they talk about black people with the quick twitch?
Fast switch.
Fast switch, right? So
Fast switch blackness was in full
no,
effect.
but Darren was quick, very quick, right? So he jumps up and he kicks me in the face, like he punts me in the face for no reason whatsoever. We're just playing football, and I guess I'm like 8 and you're like 10. This is summertime, or maybe 9 and 11, something like that. 9 and 11, I think.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So he just kicks me in the face, and I mean kicks me hard. I'm bleeding. My lip is bleeding. And then he runs because Darren was faster than I was. He was fast kid, right? So he runs, and we're at my aunt's house. So he runs into the gate, pushes the gate closed. I push the gate after him, and he runs and he locks the door, and he starts to mock me from behind the glass. He's in the house now. She has a back porch,
So
but
you
it
were
was
like
in
the
case.
worst type of like little brother. You weren't
So-
the one that would like.
I'm not the little brother.
And he's the
That's
big
right.
brother.
That's what makes it worse in my head. Is that you're the older brother, and you're the one that'll like do the hit and run, like guerrilla warfare
That
tactics.
fuck shit, dude.
For no reason whatsoever, right? And so he's teasing me behind the glass, and he just thinks he's so safe behind the glass, And so I punched through the glass window, right? I punched through the glass window, and then Darren's face just like, boom, he just freezes. He's like, oh, what the fuck is about to happen
See,
right
because
now?
here's the thing. I was naive in that moment. I realized as his hand was going through the glass that not only like, oh, he's gonna get me, whatever. That doesn't matter. It's deeper than that. He's willing to go through a level that I'm not willing to go through. Right? It's like when someone's like, if you do this, I'm gonna fucking kill you.
Right.
And they say that shit, but they're not gonna do shit.
They don't mean
Because killing you has consequences that they don't want to fucking deal with. You would think that breaking a window would have consequences that he didn't want to deal with. That's the psychology I have when I'm behind this glass mocking him. That by the time there's enough ruckus here, there's going to be adults intervening, and I'll win for a short period of time. For a short period of time, I'll win one battle over this man. This is what I'm thinking.
That's not how it happened.
That's not.
So
because as his hand goes through that glass, I realize, like, oh, not only am I going to lose this battle, I can never win this war.
Because
his fear of consequences
to the next level
is way less than mine. I'm gonna lose this war. Fuck! And now here he comes.
yeah. And you got what you had coming, but it just would always surprise me why you would just I could never be a cruel person. Like, I could be violent in those circumstances, but I could never just be cruel for no reason whatsoever to, and that was something that was
I specialized in.
That was a boundary that he did not have. True. So I was certainly willing to, it was, like I mentioned, it just seemed to me just a horrible injustice that we're just playing football, and because you got tackled, you're just going to get up and kick me in the face, right? And
it's funny though, these themes that are just in a childhood moment, right? This is just childhood bullshit in a sense, right? Yeah. We're playing a little game. One kid hits another kid, runs away. The other kid gets him and beats his ass, right?
Yeah.
But what's going on there is that could just pan out for the rest of our existences.
Yeah.
I spent my entire adult life trying to stop being cruel and become more effective and actually powerful. Because that cruelty came from a recognition that I was weak on a lot of levels. And I wanted to do damage even though I was weak. So I had to be cruel. That was my strategy, right? Devin, his response to injustice is so deep that that's a huge motherfucking part of your actual adult life and has been for a long time. Trying to right forms of injustice.
Yeah, the first fight I ever got in was because of Darren too. Well, we were on.
You're like, motherfucker, come to think of it.
And that's what I never understood, because he was my big brother, but I would be always defending Darren, so.
Well, I couldn't fight.
That's not really true, because he kind of could fight.
I could kind of sort of fight.
And I remember I was so proud that one time when you hit the kid at the sleepover, and you came up with that term that he bipped you or something like that.
No,
you punched
the kid. He hit me.
Yeah, you bipped him. You punched him in the face, and you beat him. And I was just very proud of you.
We gotta bring that back. Actually,
I was proud of you.
We need to start bipping motherfuckers out here.
But when I was like 3 years old, Darren was like 5, and we were on 138th Street. And he got his bike. He got bike jacked. You got Mackie, the kid on the street, had knocked Darren off his bike and just jacked his bike.
On this motherfucking podcast,
right? And so
shout out to Mackie.
I had a tricycle, and so I just rode my tricycle down the street, and
Wait, slow down. Just think of this image right now.
Hold on. Before this image happens, I need to know the shapes and sizes of you as kids. Because I need to know
it's about the same as it is now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just I was kind of smaller.
Chubby.
He was kind of thick. I was kind of slim.
All right.
Yeah.
So make sure everything matches up in my head correctly.
Yeah.
So wait, I'm down.
Yeah.
And here comes this chubby kid on a tricycle to the motherfucking rescue. Like, oh hell no! Like on the tricycle. Like imagine that shit.
Yeah. So I rode my tricycle down the street. I wish they had cell phones then. This would be hilarious to watch in retrospect.
World Star viral shit.
Yeah,
right
even
here.
though as much as I oppose that, I hate World Star and all of that bullshit, right? But that would have been a hilarious thing to see in retrospect. 3 years old riding your tricycle down the street. But I rode the tricycle down the street, and we started fighting the kid who took my brother's bike. And then I remember it because he bit me. I had to go to the hospital to get a shot, and I stomped on his face, right? So we had these Converse Chuck Taylor shoes, and he had a Chuck Taylor foot shoe imprint on his face. And so, and there was the whole controversy on the street. His mother was, look what your baby did to my boy's face. Well, why your son steal my son's bicycle? but we all were friends subsequently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just some things that happened in the neighborhood.
In the neighborhood.
Yeah.
When neighborhoods were neighborhoods.
Yeah, it was a real neighborhood. 138th Street was a very real neighborhood with a matriarch and everything. But
we had a Grandma Judy.
Yeah.
And Grandma Judy was like the matriarch of the whole street. Like
But-
if Grandma Judy caught you doing some shit, you were in trouble. You couldn't have said, no, I didn't. If Grandma Judy said you did that shit, you did that shit.
Yeah.
There was no my mom would never question it. If Grandma Judy had said, Darren did this, and I whooped him on the spot, nobody would have tripped really. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I kind of can.
yeah, but yeah, so I think so. It would be odd to me, because I was the kind of person who would always protect your family, And Darren was like, yeah, fuck all that noise, family, So, that I would be like, why would you, I help you. And you can't win. like it would just I would be puzzled by the fact that not only would he, be cruel or be kind of like an asshole sometimes, but that he would always start a physical confrontation. Right. I would never start it. Never. Not one time in all of our life did I start the fight.
Okay.
Not one time did I lose the fight. Right? Not one time.
Also true.
Well, I guess maybe
also
when
right.
I was a baby and I couldn't speak and couldn't move, he was probably... I don't know. He was probably winning when I couldn't walk. He probably was winning when I was in the little, baby seat rocker, whatever. But no, it never made sense to me. It never did. I don't know. You'd have to. So what was that about? What was that about?
That's a good question. I really don't exactly know. I don't exactly know. I don't think at that point I really didn't like myself. It wasn't that.
No.
That was much later.
That was much later. You were
I
quite
was
fine with yourself at that point.
I liked myself. So I don't know why I would seek out situations where I would constantly lose and feel punished.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Or maybe you just had such a high level of self-worth that you thought this time maybe. I don't know. Maybe you thought,
Coyote shit?
yeah, maybe
like this time.
yeah,
Gonna be
maybe you
different.
thought this time it was going to be different. I don't know. Maybe I hit you really hard and just fucked your brain or something, but either way, I don't know.
In court, by the way.
I don't know.
I'm gonna be like, look,
My brother.
not guilty by reason of
I don't know.
concussive injury as a child.
I don't know. But I do know that it was always the case that you started it.
I do not. I don't debate this. I will not contest this.
Yeah.
This is true.
Yeah, I was pretty much a nice guy.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
you were like really nice.
Yeah, still
had,
am. I'm a nice guy.
You had I felt like you had like a code about you, and I didn't have like a real code. It was just like if something offends me in any way, burn it down, like kill them.
Yeah.
Even if I'm not capable, like I wanted to kill everything that like bothered me in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But like this dude would oh, there's a puppy or there's an old lady, we have to help them, and I'd be like, like no, I'd rather push them into the traffic.
Yeah.
So
It's not good.
at least
Yeah.
you didn't progress.
No.
Yeah, I was saying at least you didn't progress into all right, well, fists don't work. Oh, let me get sharper objects.
No. Like
He did.
What?
He did one time
What
pick
did I
up a
do?
knife. You pulled a knife on me
Did I?
before. Yeah, you did.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
All
you
right,
did.
I don't recall that, but I
Yeah.
believe you.
I don't recall.
No, I
But
believe
know.
you.
Yeah, it happened.
But I just don't remember that.
Yeah, I remember it.
When? What happened?
You were in the living room, and we started fighting, and you ran into the kitchen, and then you grabbed a
Did I
knife.
get a good one?
They were all good knives. Dad had really good knives.
But like a butcher knife?
It was I don't think it was a butcher knife.
Or like a butter knife?
It wasn't a butter knife. It was a knife. It was a shank. It was
Steak knife.
it was something that could really do harm to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was
All right,
like,
so apparently I did escalate things.
All right,
yeah.
you escalated.
And then I grabbed the knife too.
He escalated.
And then you were like, all right, I quit. You put the knife down.
See, of course.
You put the knife down.
Because again, I
you
realized
just, you
there's
just wanted to see how
levels.
far this would go.
yeah, there's levels. Like
Yeah.
he's gonna take this to a level I'm not willing to be comfortable at.
Yeah. See, and I wasn't comfortable with initiating the interaction, but I wasn't comfortable with letting you win, considering that you had initiated, like you initiated this unfortunate act of violence. I was just like relaxed and chilling, and you would be like,
Injustice.
yeah. So the bad guy can't win. The bad guy, you can't let the bad guy win. You were the bad guy.
I was the bad guy.
So you can't let the bad guy win.
All right, so
you have to beat the bad guy.
So let's bring things into
by
modern times.
any means necessary.
If you had to define the bad guy now as an American, do you think that Donald Trump
I would
is
define
the
bad guy as America.
Really?
Right now. And always, really.
The bad guy is America. What does that mean?
America. I mean, it's not just who is the president right now, but if you look at the history of America, if it were any other country in the history of the world, it would be considered to be incapable of ever even pretending to be the moral leader of anything whatsoever. So it's a country that's founded on ethnic cleansing. It's a country that's founded on slavery and genocide.
I mean, these are things that are true, but that's
Yeah.
also one extreme way to place the narrative.
And
right? Like
why?
If you want a certain outcome at the end of the statement,
What's another narrative?
Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Then you say genocide, slavery,
Yeah.
no morals.
I didn't say no morals, but morals that let you commit genocide and enslave people. Morals that find that to be morally acceptable enough to defend it, to codify it in law and defend it through murder and torture and rape.
I just can't think of any places that haven't had wars.
I'm not saying wars are not the same thing.
Wars involve slavery and rape and genocide.
No.
They do.
Wars can involve rape. Wars can involve
many wars
genocide.
Have involved genocide, rape, and slavery.
Very few wars have involved the almost extermination of an entire population spanning a continent.
Agreed.
Very few wars, though, people have been enslaved as a consequence of war, including some of the people who were brought here, were enslaved as a consequence of war in Africa, have had the type of slavery, chattel slavery, and have it endure for the number of centuries that it endured here. And with the consequences that it endured here. And then that after it supposedly ended, found new ways to codify something that was basically akin to slavery under another name. And so...
Now, what's slavery under another name?
Well, the situation that existed post-Reconstruction where black code laws, vagrancy laws, things what happened in America after the collapse of Reconstruction, when the real Americans decided that they would make up at the expense of the niggers. And that's been the narrative.
Do you think there's a better place for a black person to be in the world than America today?
It depends on what you mean for a black person. I don't speak for black people in general. We, as if all black people are part of the same national community. There are
they not?
No.
So Pan-Africanism is not a thing?
It is a thing. It is a political perspective. It's a political philosophy. And
but
some
Pan-Africanists
that you
subscribe to?
I consider the descendants of enslaved African people in this hemisphere to be Africans. But I don't consider there to be a single African nation. That there's a huge diversity among African peoples. There are dozens, if not hundreds, potentially. There are dozens, at least, of African nations. And I believe those of us who were enslaved in this hemisphere, especially under American and British rule, constitute a separate and distinct African nation.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are a nation in my estimation.
So America is the bad guy.
America is probably the worst guy. Yeah.
I don't subscribe to that.
I understand that.
But
what makes then let me ask you, what would make someone bad? Who would be the worst guy? Who would be worse? What I
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just know that right now if I go to social media, there's extremists that are gonna say America is the problem.
It's my problem.
There are people that would just consider themselves regular Democrats, like regular people who aren't even deeply politicized, that are going to say that Donald Trump is the worst creature They call him Hitler. They call him a Nazi.
Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is better than Thomas Jefferson, as from a moral standpoint.
Because he doesn't own slaves?
He doesn't own and rape slaves.
Okay.
You know, so Donald Trump is not in any way the least moral president. He's more moral in some respects, or at least he hasn't been caught committing the immoralities that the founding fathers did as a matter of course. You know,
Do you find his presidency as disturbing as the media sends the messages that it is?
I'm not disturbed by his presidency. I find him objectionable, as I find them all objectionable.
Nazi to describe him? And
No.
I think you're a unique person to ask.
Really?
Yes, because
I know something about
during
that.
our teenage years,
Mm-hmm.
you read Hitler's shit a lot. Like, you're very familiar
Yeah,
with his rhetoric and that history of World War II.
yeah.
So,
No, I'm extremely familiar with
And-
the rise and
and
fall of
leftists
Adolf
tend
Hitler.
to identify
No, he's not a Nazi.
No, leftists tend to identify him as a Nazi, and leftists tend to identify black nationalism as something that they're at least okay with supporting on Facebook. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't think. I think many people who call themselves leftists, the term fascist and Nazi are terms that are thrown around loosely,
Very loosely.
largely divorced from any real connection to the political movements that gave birth to these actual terms. So no, I wouldn't say that Donald Trump is a Nazi. I would say that certainly he's likely to be, given the people that he supports politically around the world, I would say he'd likely be sympathetic to fascist perspectives, perhaps, you know, but he's certainly not a Nazi. To be a Nazi is a very specific thing. It's even different than being a fascist, you know, though they are movements that share many similar concepts, but it's different. It is very different.
Have you ever seen this Vice documentary about the situation in Greece? It came out a few years ago. They were talking about the Golden Dawn.
I did not see it.
And so, for those that don't know, the Golden Dawn is a far-right organization that operates out of Greece. And they were talking to one of their, heads of information.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked her, are you guys Nazis? Because they were distributing things from Goebbels and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, no, we're not Nazis. Mm-hmm. Nazis are German. And then they're like, oh, but you are a fascist, right? And she's like, oh, no. What do you think?
Italian.
Fascists are Italian. I am a nationalist, is what she said, right? So, although in this country, it seems that left-leaning people tend to loosely support Black Lives Matter, Black nationalism.
Well, that's a question how you define Black nationalism. But Black Lives Matter, what is that?
I know they're not the same.
Yeah, I mean, but to support it, like, what would be to oppose it to say Black lives don't matter?
No.
You know, so
I oppose that group as a group. As a phrase, no one truly, only a sick person would oppose the phrase that Black Lives Matter.
Can I ask you a question? Besides the phrase, what has the group done?
They marched and stopped some traffic somewhere.
So the greatest accomplishment of the group is really the popularization of the phrase, in my estimation.
I think you're right.
You know, that outside of that doesn't mean that well, there are other accomplishments in my opinion, so I don't have an issue with them. I don't take issue with them, with Black Lives Matter.
I think they're the worst named political group in the history of fucking political groups.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the dumbest things they ever did because it just gives people such a huge window to kick your ass.
All lives matter.
Yep. That's just too big of a window.
But yes.
Like, it was a poorly named group. Like, if you're going to say we are against police brutality, specifically the way that they treat black males.
Mm-hmm. Black people, yeah, black people. But it grew out of, I think it was Trayvon Martin, I think, that initially sparked it, or Mike Brown.
Mike Brown.
Mike Brown popularized it. I think some of the people got involved before Mike Brown. But
what was your take on that shit?
Mike Brown?
The hands up, don't shoot shit.
I'm not a fan of the slogan.
Again,
Hands up, don't shoot.
maybe the worst slogan ever.
I'm not a fan of, you know.
I do this demonstration for people when they disagree with me on that shit. When they're like, hands up, don't shoot. It's like, you said that to me in real life.
Yeah,
If
I'm not
anyone
a fan.
says that to me, the demonstration I do is I put my hands up and I stand like 20 feet from them. and I stand still. And I say, would you shoot me right now? Gun in your hand, would you shoot me right now? And they're like, no, never. I'm like, all right, straight. Then I start walking backwards, but facing them. Would you shoot me now? They're like, no. Then I start walking forward. And by that time, I'm about 15 feet away. They're ready to shoot me in the face. And that's all you need to know. A person doesn't need to have a weapon when a weapon is drawn on them to be threatening to the person with the weapon.
Now, so we jumped 2 topics real quick. So we were discussing Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
I don't know if you were trying to lead into the fact that maybe it's cool that the police shot Mike Brown because he was walking towards him potentially with his hands up.
I didn't say that.
I don't know. Well, we could go into that.
I wasn't there.
We can go into it.
If what I said happened, which is I don't think is what happened, but if what I said happened is what happened, I would say yes.
Yeah, I would say no. But there's philosophy behind that. I would say that the police officers that are policing these people to begin with have no legitimate right to be in those spaces policing these people, and that those people in those communities have a legitimate right to do whatever they deem to be necessary to remove that presence. But what happened in that individual
with what?
with anything other than that presence. So the thing is, what it should be replaced with, I have my own ideas of what it should be replaced with and where those people ought to be, and not necessarily St. Louis, or Cleveland for that matter. So, and that's something perhaps we can explore going forward in the conversation. But certainly police forces, even under existing law, there's training concerning, in most police departments, things like de-escalation. And just in general, when it's not necessary, when your life is not being threatened, or serious bodily harm is not being threatened, it is unacceptable to utilize deadly force in that situation. Now, if you're just so afraid.
But what's life-threatening? Because here's my take on life-threatening for myself. If you try to punch me or push me, I think I should be allowed to fucking kill you. I weigh 145 pounds.
Absolutely. Now,
if a man who's normal man size, anything over 175 pounds, tries to touch me, if I fall, I could die. I could hit my head on some shit. So if you're approaching me in a manner that's clearly hostile, I feel like I have the right to take your life.
But if your job is to intervene only in situations that are likely hostile, so you're just a human, you're just a civilian, you're walking down the street, minding your own business, unless you encounter someone who's kind of like you were as a child, right? You're safe. You have a rational expectation that you're not going to be punched in the face, or at least you have a right to expect that you're not going to encounter violence. If you are in the police department, your entire job is to respond to situations in which, there's infraction, there's a challenge. Apprehending people inherently involves physically engaging people, mostly who probably are not too keen to go to jail, And so there's an inherent risk of violence in being a police officer. And yet you're not allowed to kill everyone you come into contact with.
Correct.
You can only, so what is considered a reasonable threat to safety, to danger of endangering one's life, is different than a situation for a normal person.
Kind of, sort of. A larger person approaching me is still a threat, especially if they've been giving an order not to.
But you also, as a police officer,
then they're like, they've said fuck the decorum. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, once you say fuck the decorum and you're within arm's reach of me, it's too late. It's too late. You could lose that fight. You could lose your gun.
That's a possibility. In any kind of confrontation, it's a possibility that there could be a fight. And any kind of confrontation.
Respect.
So any kind of arrest could turn into a fight at any point. But on account of that doesn't mean that, a person twitches, now I get to shoot him. I
agree. A person twitches, you do not get to shoot them.
There you go. Or in many other circumstances when a person who had there are some jobs that aren't for some people.
I agree.
And if you are not a person that has above the average amount of courage, then you probably shouldn't have a job that involves confrontation. I
couldn't agree with you more. I think there's people that have that job that should not have that job. Like the situation that happened here in Cleveland.
I think all of these people. Go ahead.
That was a person that should not have had that fucking job.
Which situation?
I'm talking about Tamir Rice.
Tamir Rice. Yeah, but even worse than Tamir Rice. When what happened in East Cleveland was worse than Tamir Rice.
What happened there?
When a car backfired. This was Timothy and Melissa. Their last names right now are escaping me.
Okay.
But they were downtown Cleveland. There was a backfiring of the car, and that led to a chase that went through several jurisdictions. Ended up in East Cleveland. 62 police cars were involved in this chase. Once the car backfired, what was reported was that shots were fired. No shots were fired. It was just the car backfiring. No guns were found. No weapons. No gunpowder residue. Nothing. They chase these individuals as if they're chasing Bonnie and Clyde, right? Because once they hear a shot fired, this became a lynch mob. It wasn't people seeking to apprehend criminals. It became a lynch mob. They chased these people through multiple jurisdictions and into East Cleveland, into our middle school parking lot, where they kind of crashed, car stopped. Then 137 shots were fired at these two unarmed people in their vehicle. This included Michael Brillo jumping on the hood of the car.
I remember this.
And firing into the car.
Yeah.
Of course,
That's some cowboy shit.
No one was charged with anything. Mike Brillo was charged for it, but no one ended up going to prison for this.
Mm-hmm.
He lost his job. Some other people were fired.
And he should lose his job.
And some people other people got their jobs back.
But I would say that some of that is understandable. I'm serious.
Understandable from what vantage point?
From the vantage point of, if I am in a car and someone says shots have been fired on people on the same team as me,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to pursue them as if they tried to take the life of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's crazy. I think it's extraordinarily unfortunate. I think it's extraordinarily unfortunate. And I wonder if they had done a better job of stopping the car earlier, if that could have been different. But it's just a fucked up situation.
It's a normal situation that made fucked up by fucked up people. It wasn't a fucked up situation that had to end in people dying. It was
it did not have to end in
lynch
people dying.
mob.
I don't think it had to end in people dying.
Yeah, I mean,
think
lynch mobs tend to end up in fucked up situations.
And it's saying, oh, shots were fired.
Okay, and
once shots have been fired,
then what?
Then things are gonna get wild.
No, but what I'm saying is the idea of professionalism is that just because shots are fired, you don't get to get wild. I don't
disagree with you there either.
And the thing is this,
I don't see. So like, there's right and wrong, which are hard to hold people accountable to in the moment.
But there are also laws.
I hear you. Mm-hmm. And within those laws, that word justifiable comes into fucking.
It does.
Into view.
And here, this is one of the reasons.
And once someone says shots are fired, it's justifiable to believe that the car has people in it that are armed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to jump on the hood like you're in a fucking action movie and unload and empty the clip? No.
Do you need to
That guy needs to lose his fucking job.
Do you need to unload on the car at all once the car stopped?
Maybe. Because you believe that there are weapons in that car.
Okay, so say there
that have already been fired
mm-hmm.
in a threatening situation.
So it's interesting how this happens when the so-called perpetrators are black and how it doesn't happen in other situations. Because you have several examples of mass shooters who've gone into places where there's not a question, do they have the gun? The body count is huge. They're shooting up churches, shooting up people in grocery stores.
I agree that there's
they come out
a giant disparity in the way that those people are treated.
Having actually killed people,
mm-hmm.
shots being fired, people being dead, and they get to surrender and go to Burger King, and go home.
I know about these stories.
In this situation, you have people in a vehicle. So from a vehicle, and you are also in a vehicle with body armor, and your vehicle is also protection, cover for you. So let's say these people have guns in their car. They are in a vehicle. You can park your car.
Was this wrong? Yes.
But I'm not just speaking of the morality of the question.
You're saying this is a systematic problem.
The justifiability of this situation, whether the people were our people or some other people. That when you have people who are in very little position to pose any real threat.
What does that mean?
So if you're sitting in a vehicle and you have dozens of police cars behind you, the people in the police car are protected.
To a degree.
They're protected by body armor. They're protected by their vehicle, by cover, by choosing how close they want to be to
Engage.
the people
Yeah.
who potentially could pose a threat. The car is stopped now. They also have the ability to speak through the microphone to these people. You know, so before you engage and just open up like you've just caught Bonnie and Clyde, right? There are many other things you could do if your intention was not just to conduct the actions of a lynch mob, that you decided once you heard shot fired what the end of this situation was going to be. And that's the difference between
I think that's
people
a leap, though.
I don't think that's a leap.
I think it's a leap. To say that they decided what the end was going to be could be a leap.
137 shots at two people who remained in the car during all the shooting, who had no weapons to begin with, so couldn't have been returning fire. But you were not under an immediate
And 137 rounds, you shoot.
Mm-hmm.
You said there were 62 cops involved.
There were 13 police officers shooting.
All right, so that's a clip apiece.
Yeah, you're firing a clip, no return fire.
I'm just saying. That doesn't take very long.
It doesn't. I'm not saying it takes a long period of time.
It's not like they were shooting for
It
10
takes
minutes.
long enough. It takes long enough because you're supposed to be having eyes on target. You're not supposed to just be shooting randomly in the direction of a potential threat. You're supposed to have eyes on the thing you are shooting at and taking aimed shots at the thing that you are shooting at. So you're telling me you have eyes on two people in a vehicle who can't be pointing a weapon at you. They have none.
Because it doesn't exist.
And there are at least 13 of you, weapons drawn, firing shot after shot after shot after shot.
Yeah, it's bad.
And
I'm just
then
trying to make sure that
my man who is in danger, who feels that this is a threatening situation, who feels that this is a threatening situation, then moves closer to this threatening situation by jumping on the hood of the vehicle.
That's madness. That's madness. That's why that dude lost his job,
further
right?
rounds
Come on
into
now.
the car.
That's why that dude lost his fucking job.
He lost his job because of political pressure. Other people kept their jobs. People who were fired then were reinstated by the arbitrator.
I believe you.
You know, but he didn't go to prison.
Well, they have good lawyers. They have a union.
But see, the thing is, for me, and this is one of the reasons why I think self-determination is necessary. Instead of spending the next 400 years trying to argue what is and what is not justifiable when our people are gunned down, unarmed by police, that we need an arrangement that changes the nature of who's policing our community and what type of government our people live under. You know, that.
So, do you believe that if an all-black police force, and let's say in the next 5 years, there was a city somewhere, maybe in a southern state, where it was all black, and all the police officers are black, do you think that those kinds of situations would no longer occur?
No. So the thing is this.
Do you think the frequency would drop to
I think the frequency would drop.
That would be significant
just
enough?
by the character of the police force in the city. For instance, in East Cleveland, without an all-black police force, with a force that has disproportionate number of whites, there have been no fatalities. The East Cleveland police have killed no one in over a decade. They have killed no one. This is a 95% black city that is the most impoverished. There's a different political climate in a city. One, the police force doesn't have the backup that other police forces have.
They don't have numbers.
So you can't call on, if it gets out of hand, because you have escalated and there's a community response, you have trouble. You have a problem on your hand. It's harder to escalate when there's only 6 of you on duty at a given time, perhaps. But the other thing is that there's a different political climate. So
there's pros and cons to that. I can actually see how that would be a pro in certain
I
cities.
consider it a significant pro.
In small cities?
A small city, which East Cleveland is.
Yeah, and it's a small city.
Also, there's greater political accountability in a 95% black community. So there was a shooting, a police shooting. They didn't shoot anyone. They fired their weapon 11 times. Between the two of them, 11 shots were fired. This was maybe 8 years ago, something like that. I forgot the time frame. It's been a while. A person rammed their vehicle, who had been pulled over, backed into their vehicle, pulled off, and they fired at the back of the vehicle. No one was hit. No one was wounded.
Okay.
Both of those officers were fired. And then they were fired. There was no arbitrator. They're just gone. They're off the police force. Both of them gone. No need for protest, nothing. They're gone. Not by a mayor that was a progressive, but a reactionary mayor. The mayor that we recalled, that I led the recall against.
Mm-hmm.
They may have let them officially resign, but they're off the force.
Which is all that really matters.
Not policing that community. And there's been no homicides, no police killings in that community. There's been police brutality, there's been corruption, but no killing. And part of that is the political situation. There's no segment of the population. It's an all black, not only 90%, 95% black population, but disproportionately working class and poor. So besides 5 white people on the Hill, there's nobody that's going to be sympathetic to your, I thought I was in danger, you know? And that's going to have political consequences immediately for the administration.
So
Any administration. So I don't think that just having black faces in the police cars is going to put an end to people who should not be killed being killed. You know, there are things beyond.
You think less better trained police would be a better answer?
I think decentralized. So one of the things that I think would be beneficial would be to have a situation where the police must not only be residents of the city that they police, but in some cases even of the communities that they police.
People think that about teachers as well.
I think that about teachers as well. You know, and that was the law municipality wise. That was the law in Cleveland, largely until black people began to have political control in Cleveland. And then they changed the law and made what used to be the law illegal. And this is one of the reasons why this game we've been playing for 4 centuries with America is over, as far as I'm concerned. Is that
this game?
Yeah, you know,
he's done with games.
So in Cleveland, they had Ohio has a thing called home rule, which basically states that if you are a municipality, the things that impact your city only, then you should be able to dictate. You know, yeah, thank you. But you should be able to dictate. So to work for the city of Cleveland or to work for the Cleveland School District, you had to be a resident of the city of Cleveland or the school district.
Yeah.
Now, this was never a problem for the 100 years where white people had unfettered control over the city and the school district. Shortly after that dynamic shifted, they start to change the situation and say, you don't have to live in the city. They changed the law at the state level. I think it's caused by the fact that whites in the cities, and this is not just a Cleveland situation, it's an Ohio situation. Whites who used to live in the city and were the city employees didn't want to live with niggers, but they didn't want to quit their jobs. They wanted to make the money that they make by working for the city, their good city job and benefits, their teaching job and benefits. But they didn't want to have to be your neighbor. They wanted to be as far away from you as possible, but they wanted to take from the pool of funding, but they didn't want to have to live next to you and contribute to it. You know, and so
now is that actually evil?
We're not talking about evil.
So
we're talking
I
about.
Want to be a teacher.
I don't. Good
imagine
and evil.
I want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And I get hired.
Mm-hmm.
And my school is where Rickoff was. So, like, say I'm 149th in Kinsman, which is not a pretty part of town. Do I have to live in Mount Pleasant in order to serve those children well?
Now, I think you serve them better if you do.
Perhaps.
Now, I don't think it's even a perhaps. I can go into why I think you serve them better if you do, and why it's better for them and for the community if you do. And better for their performance, even if you do.
I have to live next to
a
broke down house? I can luck out and get a grandmother. Let's not act like there aren't working class and rural people in the hood. I could get working class people, or I could get some bullshit.
But before we go into that, what I'm going to say is this: that some of those communities wouldn't look like that if the people who had to work in those communities lived there. You see, so those communities. For instance, in East Cleveland, but even in the situation where you spoke about Mount Pleasant, the law before wasn't neighborhood specific, right? Because just people moved, but it was city specific because resources come from the city. You know, property taxes are paid in the municipality.
Not paid as Glenville and Collinwood.
They go you know, and they're dispersed that way. Income tax, same thing. You know, so the idea is that if you're pulling from these funds,
Anthony, can I get a high lift?
Yeah, if you're pulling from this pool of funds, then you should be contributing to it. in some form or fashion. But also the character of the community changes by the people who live in that community. So if you have a community such as East Cleveland, I think East Cleveland is a prime example of why there should be effective home rule, and why the inability of the municipality to dictate and the school district to dictate that the people who work here must live here, has huge consequences. The city is only 3.2 square miles, and about 2 square miles of that is the park. So it's a very small community. Almost none of the teachers who teach in East Cleveland live in East Cleveland. Almost none of the police live in East Cleveland. So this is a huge thing. So in a small community, if you had hundreds of school employees living in the community, that would make a huge difference in the character of the community. They would be people who are not only paying property taxes, but they would be living in homes that are now vacant. By having a street where teachers live, so there's not just that grandmother, there's, the teacher, when you're going to sell a house and market a house, the people who are in the community makes a difference to the desirability of that community. So if you live on a street where the teachers and the police and the fire live on the street.
But how are you going to space these people out?
I mean, they could congregate in particular areas. With respect to home rule and that public policy, that cities should be able to make this determination for themselves.
I'm just thinking of myself as one of these workers. Mm-hmm. And if I want to do my job and raise my family effectively today, without having to have a whole lot of hope that it's going to get better, I would opt not to live in a community that wasn't reflective of what I wanted my family's life to be like.
Then what I think is that that city and that school district should have the choice to decide that the pros of having you in that community are worth the fact that you're not contributing. But that should be their choice. That should not be... So each city should be able to make that determination independently, whether or not they want to outsource that.
You won't get an argument from me.
But that is now illegal. What I'm saying is that what was the law is now illegal when black people were in a position to make the law effective in the interest of their community. And that's...
Well, if they were able to make it effective, how come they didn't make it effective? How come it became
They changed
illegal?
the law at the state level. See, this is the trap that you're in with democracy as a fake minority. As a permanent marginal minority. You're not a minority. You are effectively a nation. You're not 12% of the American population. You are 100% of the New African nation.
If that is your philosophy.
But in this dynamic, you are screwed, perpetually screwed, as a permanent marginal minority.
Why?
So in the state of Ohio, you're only 12% of the population. Laws are not made at the municipal level of any. There's no municipalities don't exist in the Constitution of the United States. It's a federal system. You have the federal government and states, and then states empower municipalities. But that's really just state authority being delegated by the state to the municipalities. So they create and
so you
incorporate
want to see systems because systems do not exist to improve the condition of black people. You believe that self-determination, some form of separation, is the only answer.
I think that independence is the only way to make self-determination effective.
Okay.
Otherwise, you are a people at the mercy, at the whim of your historical oppressor and current oppressor. And it's not a question of the color of those people. It's not a racial question. It's a national question. No people anywhere of any ethnicity or what they might call racial background like to be governed by foreigners, by strangers, effectively. So in Ireland, the Irish are not a separate race, I guess you could say, whatever that means anyway. They're whites, right? People would consider Irish to be white, very white, right? And so are the British, who occupy still the north of Ireland, the northern 6 counties of Ireland. It doesn't make the Irish feel any better that the people who starved their population and forced them to flee to America and elsewhere were white. Didn't make the oppression seem less harsh. When on Bloody Sunday, when the British paratroopers gunned down unarmed and defenseless protesters in Derry, it wasn't like those bullets felt better because they came from a gun held by a white man.
So,
but wherever you have a people,
do you tend to draw inspiration from these other struggles?
I wouldn't say I draw inspiration necessarily. I think that there's a lot to learn from other struggles. There's so much to learn from our own, that's primary, certainly. And most inspiration that I would draw would come from the history of our people here. But certainly there's a lot to be learned.
How much do you think the family aspect and the power of the individual has the power to change? Like if black people decided to truly develop a new sense of family in actual families and actual homes, which I think is actually a crisis.
Okay.
I think it's a much bigger crisis than anything that's happening to black people that is done from an external force.
I don't think it's bigger, but because
it's,
I think that is a consequence of the external
whether
force.
It's spurred or initiated by some external force, at this point, I believe is irrelevant. If you can say self-determination is important, then it can start well before.
Well, self-determination, not used loosely, as is a political term in international relations that relates to the rights of peoples to be self-governing. And what happens is the term is divorced from that more significant context and say, I'm self-determined. I decide where I live, as an individual.
Yes.
Or I'm going to decide where I buy my soap. I'm going to love my kids and buy black soap, and somehow
if black people were in a better position in general, which I think could be achieved by emphasizing things that were emphasized a generation before our generation.
Okay. And a generation before our generation, black people were still niggers in America.
Yes.
Yeah, under rule of people.
Yes, they were.
Under the rule of people who had not their best interest at heart. And even if they had it at heart, that's irrelevant. They were not self-determining. They were subject to the mercies of the majority population.
Are they doing better now? Economically?
Worse now. Worse now.
Worse,
of course.
This is what I'm saying. So,
but that's not even a point to debate. Yes, that's a fact. Yes.
This is what I'm saying. So, like, if these basic things were reinstated and reinstilled,
then you would get back to where you were.
You would get better results with better rights than you had.
You will get back to where you were when you were still a nigga with no rights.
What do you mean back to where you were with the nigga with still no rights?
You would be in the situation. What I'm saying is, if we had that situation, it wasn't like it was great. Things were bad.
There was Jim Crow on top of it. What I'm saying is,
you're saying if under the current legal framework,
yes,
black people did that, that wouldn't change the fact that you are still at the mercy of other people. And that's the issue. Whether these people do well by you today or poor by you tomorrow.
It's an issue if you want to make it an issue. What I'm saying is,
I don't think it's something that you want. It's an issue if you want to make it an issue. It's an issue to be powerless to control your own destiny as a collective. That is inherently an issue.
If you value the idea of being a collective, like if you decide to see black people as a nation, then you have a certain perspective.
If you decide not to see yourself as a collective, then there's no question of black people.
If you would rather see people that look like you have a better life,
then why, unless you see yourself as a collective? What difference?
A collective is different than a nation. You don't have to go to nation to be like,
that is true.
Like, I recognize my blackness, for fuck's sake, even though it gets questioned. Like, it's something that I recognize. It is important to me in a different way than it is important to other people that tell me how important their blackness is to them. But it's still important to me. Like, it reflects itself in the way that I coach. I am fucking hard on black dudes. Fucking hard on them. Because I want them to be fucking incredible. I want them to be unquestionable.
Why?
Because I identify with them and I understand some of the shortcomings that black athletes can have. And I attack them.
Shortcomings, okay.
There are. There are shortcomings that come with having certain attributes. So, like, it would be bullshit if we acted like we weren't
twitch,
fat. Yeah, if we weren't.
Twitch muscles.
Look at the 100-yard dash at the fucking Olympics.
No.
It's dark as fuck out there.
You don't have to.
Like, we know these things. And, like, in the current political climate, even though it doesn't really exist in this room, it's unpopular to say anything like that, even if it's positive. If you said black dudes have big dicks, you're a racist. It doesn't matter if it's something cool. You said black people are like this. So if I say black people are fast and strong.
On average, faster and stronger.
Yeah. And so if you're an athlete who is also black, a lot of times you get used to relying upon these attributes.
And you say they shortcut technique and other things.
Not just technique, but lots of other things. And I don't allow that shit.
But you disallow it less than you would disallow it with some other athlete?
I would.
And why is that?
Because I'm racist. No, because
you have a closer connection to this black person, no matter how much this is right. No,
I'm not trying to not acknowledge that.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
There's a peoplehood.
But I don't see the necessity for a separate nation, even though a great deal of injustice brought about the existence of black people in this nation in our current state. In the numbers that we have in this country, those numbers were brought about by slavery. That's fucked up. But it's done.
It is done.
That's already happened.
That did happen.
So now I live in a world where I have to find a way to feed myself, make money, and contribute, and decide if I want to raise a family in this world, which, regardless to what my partner might look like, will still look a lot like me, and will still be seen as a black child. Whether I marry a black woman or an Asian woman or a Hispanic woman, I'm going to make black people if I make people.
Yeah. And where might that not be a disadvantage?
I don't think it wouldn't be a disadvantage anywhere. I think
perhaps in a black nation state. Now, the thing is this. One, I would like to draw a distinction between the concept of nation and state. Because a nation in America, under American rule, in this territory where the American flag flies, representing the sovereign authority of the United States government, these terms are fudged. So people use them interchangeably, nation and state. This is something that's not the case many places in the world. They mean very different things outside of the United States because a nation is a people. So if you speak to people,
and a state is a place.
A state is it's the government effectively. It is the power of the government,
and
the
only
organized
place
force.
Where we actually.
So we are a people. So a people can exist. A nation can exist with or without self-governance. So within an empire, including dozens of nations. So there can be a nation without a state. The Kurds don't have a state, but they are a nation, a people with a common language, a common culture, a common historical experience that binds them together in a way that separates them in some respect from their neighboring nations, from other peoples, and I would say that exists, that the descendants of enslaved African people were being forged into a separate and distinct nation. At the same, a new African nation was being born in what is now called America, at the same time that a new European nation was being forged that became America, and Americans grew out of that, and so an American was not the same at some point as an Englishman, though they kept the language, though their culture was rooted in initially the English culture, even the court system, but they became separate and distinct, so much so that a white American with an English name and English ancestry is a foreigner in London today. He's no longer English. He speaks English. He's white, of the same stock, but he's no longer English. He became something different. His grandfather became something different as a consequence of this shared historical experience with other Europeans. He became an American. And from the many tribes and nations of Africa, a new African nation was being born at the exact same time as a new European nation was being born. And it stayed into being. And what I'm saying is that, and it was separate and distinct. And it's not just a question of opinion. So
would you flatly say that you are not an American?
I'm not an American. I live under American rule. I have a passport that's a U.S. passport. And
you were in the military at a certain point in your life?
Yeah, of course. Yes, I was in the...
During that time, did you consider yourself to be an American?
Yeah, when I joined, yes. Yes, I did. I did consider myself to be an American. It wasn't a question that you reflect on very much, in the same way that a Jew in Germany might have thought himself a German as any other German. Until he was...
But in our experience...
Until it was made clear that he was not so German.
Mm-hmm. What experiences have you had that told you you were not an American?
It's not even a question of... You have to have an individual experience, you know.
I feel like you've done a math problem, and you were like, okay,
what is an American?
And due to these things, I'm not one of those.
But it's not just due to those things. It's a question of one, you know. So it's not just like, it's not something that's divorced from one's experience. Your otherness is central to your life from the time you interact with people who are not like you.
True.
And it is, in many cases, the decisive factor. And you, not only is that you are never free to be you in America.
Why?
Without having to contemplate very significant repercussions. So, for instance, the average black woman cannot just wear her hair in a natural state without having to contemplate the economic... Not just how her girlfriends or will the boys like me, but can I work? Can I advance in the society? Do I have to change my voice on a phone call with the boss so I don't sound too black and thus too threatening?
Now, it goes the other way too. We both know this.
What?
Do I have to change my voice around black people to make sure that they fucking respond to me?
But it's not just the voice. So here's the thing, you know, and this comes into that question of acting white, right? Talking white, acting white.
Which is, I think, one of the most corrosive things, one of the most detrimental things. And of course I feel that way because of the way that I fucking talk.
But the kids are not, so it's interesting, right? It is wrong in a sense. But I think in some ways the children who say that are hitting on something that they just can't really articulate. Well, when they say you're acting white, it's not because you're talking well, right? Nobody says Malcolm X is acting white.
No, but
right.
but
No.
he came out saying only pro-black things. So he identified himself as being out here with this message.
So we have that's good. It's good that you say that, right?
If Malcolm Little was sitting in a class...
Well, Malcolm Little had been sitting in a
class. Hold on,
yeah.
I'm saying. In the second grade at Charles Dickens, and he spoke with diction, he would have been treated like a fucking asshole.
I don't agree.
Why?
So, we grew up in the same household, right? I didn't walk around speaking. I read books, right?
You did. More than
all
me.
the time. More than you, right? I listened to Billy Joel, right?
Elton John.
And Elton John.
And DMX.
And DMX. We were teenagers when DMX, but you know. But Billy Joel.
It was all the same time.
Was my favorite singer, right?
Respect.
Played it outside. People knew this, right? It wasn't a secret. Right? It wasn't a secret.
Yeah, but you can hurt people.
But did anyone ever accuse me of acting white?
Because they didn't want to get knocked the fuck out.
No.
Yeah, it's a factor.
That could have become a factor at some point. But what children see, and when they say you're acting white, it's something like you are putting a distance between yourself and us and acting like you are better than us. It's not just you sound. It's not just. Not just that, oh, you talk with excellent diction. It's you are putting a distance between you and us as if you are better than us.
That is true.
You acting white. You acting like you. They don't know how. Now this is not. It's not a proper way to describe. These are children though articulating this perspective.
I think there's some truth to that. That's why you got that's the pro wrestling thing. Like, oh yeah, handshake. Like respect. Like there's something to that in me.
You was acting white.
There's something to me like that happened.
And that didn't happen as much until you went. So it happened.
No.
I know it happened because I was there. You know, I know people would always. But you also did have this thing of you acting like you were better than other people.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's
and
really
they
true.
Say you acting like the oppressor. You acting white.
But it wasn't. That's so funny.
Can I just chime in real quick?
Yeah.
I don't think that would have mattered in any circumstances if he was whatever skin color he was. I think he would have still been as arrogant or as...
Right.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
But in the context
of black kids, they see the people who think they better than me. You want to separate yourself and put distance between you and us.
That's true.
You're acting like the other. You're acting white.
Yeah, it wasn't that I wanted to be like the white people.
There was hardly any white people to even be like.
I just wanted to distance myself from everybody else because I fucking hated everyone.
And acted and thought like you were better than them.
Yeah.
And they picked that up. It's not just that you speak good English. You speak, what they call good English,
But
because I was never acting white.
This is personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's correct about me.
Yeah.
I think that I did put distance between me and those kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I put distance between me and the other kids when I went to the white school in a completely different way. I always wanted distance between my peers. Always. No matter what it was, whether it was positive or negative, I wanted to be like, I still do this. Right. It's like, everybody going over here? Fuck that shit.
But you were
I'm going over here. Fuck y'all.
Associating more, with them than us. You were never. There was a point in which you were, you go into the fucking Glee Club. You go into some people's houses with names. Nobody ever heard names like this. You do drugs. People never even heard of these drugs. Right?
They heard of them now.
Yeah. Because
Hip-hop
of
has changed.
Rappers acting white.
No.
because
acting black.
No,
black
but because
I'm
kidding.
Too.
I'm kidding.
How dare you?
Of course, I'm just.
We're gonna get you a dose of mushrooms. How do you know that we didn't even give you those? I would never do that.
I know you wouldn't.
I'm not a dose person.
You would understand the history of escalation.
Handshake number 2. You're like, that I would fucking kill you if you did that.
But so I don't like that terminology. I don't think it's progressive to use. I think it's reactionary to use, but I think it's not always 100% inaccurate. It's not well articulated, but they're expressing something other than
it was a very
if you
good
do
way
well
of
in
describing
school,
it.
If
But that attitude does get applied by heavy-handed idiots to people who were not doing what I was doing.
I know. Now, part of that is what? That you live in a
sickness.
white society. Well, you live in a society. So in East Cleveland, all the kids who do well in school are black, and all the kids who do poorly in school are black. Because all the children in the school are black.
It was the same at my school.
So
until I moved to the white school.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that there's less of that I've witnessed. The valedictorian at Shaw High School a few years back was also the most popular kid in school.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know.
In a 95% black community. Because it's not just that the children in the classroom were black. The people that they saw in leadership being articulate every day were black too. The mayor was black.
What was it like at Rhodes?
School board was black.
You went to Rhodes,
Kinda.
A high school in Cleveland.
I kind of went to Rhodes on occasion and dropped out of school.
I was mostly at the library.
Yeah.
During those years.
Yeah, I was mostly at the library.
What did you think about the way that kids are treated in that school? You knew who the smart kids were.
Yeah, there wasn't very much, not for being smart, no.
For being separate of the people.
No, they weren't. There wasn't much. That was a very mixed school.
Okay.
So there wasn't much
Puerto
of that.
Rican kids,
a lot
black
of Puerto
kids.
Rican kids, a lot of black kids.
It was on West Side, yeah?
It was West Side, but
Okay.
these are poor people, largely. And white kids, poor white kids really weren't very good at much, so
See,
it wasn't like acting white.
Racist.
I'm serious. I'm saying, so it's not like the poor white kids were just knocking it out of the park academically.
Right.
So it wasn't a trait that was associated, but I wasn't there enough to really give you the rundown on all the minute details.
Did I graduate summa cum laude from college? Yes. Did I really go to high school? No.
I can't give you the rundown on that.
Couldn't really fuck with high school,
It
dog.
is something that has to be challenged, but what I'm saying is that largely comes from the fact that many people see in the positions of authority, speaking the King English and all of that, are separate from themselves. So if you're in an environment where the students are black, good and bad, the teachers, are black, not exclusively, but in a manner that reflects the actual community. So, you know, then that changes the dynamic as well. In Nigeria, no one says being a doctor is acting white. Everybody's trying to be a fucking doctor. You know, it's, you know, excuse my language, right?
No, you have to excuse shit.
Yeah, you know, but
you're like, no, I do.
But the dynamic is different because of the circumstance in which we live, where you are and have been effectively a nigger for 400 years, and you can't do anything at all of any consequence without the stamp of approval of the society. I lived in a 95% black community, East Cleveland, but East Cleveland can't give me a certificate to teach. The state of Ohio has to. And the state of Ohio is very different in values and composition than the city of East Cleveland. So every parent in East Cleveland could say, I want this person to teach my child. And some white people at the state level could say, we don't think he should. And they make the determination. And their determination can overrule the unanimous decision of every one of the black parents in the city of East Cleveland. And I could not teach their child. They could decide to take a university. Our grandfather went to a university, Central State, which for a period of time lost its accreditation. Which means some white people somewhere said, your degree doesn't count anymore. Because they can. And tomorrow they can say it does. And because they said it, it does the next day. Same people could teach the same classes one day and another. But they can just say it doesn't count. They can say that Pluto is a planet or it's not tomorrow. And what they say, you know, and that is the difference. And that is a fundamental difference, to be subjected, to be distinguished, to be a separate people effectively, subjected to the decisions of another people, whether they be of any other ethnic grouping, but who almost as a collective universally look at you as inferior. But though that other will dictate every aspect of your life in perpetuity. And that is
so
unacceptable.
Where do you find the black people who are ready to move into your new state? Who are the people, who are the members of this nation?
Well, all of us are members of the nation. Now, the question is...
What I'm saying, who are the members of this nation who are, I'm going to start a state? Like, if you had to put a percentage on the black people...
It's a marginal minority.
Yes.
That's largely irrelevant at the moment.
Now, here's another question. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any right to people who believe that America was founded to be, even though founded through genocide and slavery, it was founded this way to be a nation for white people?
It was.
If you believe that is true, do you think they deserve a state that is only white?
I don't speak of desert. They have a state that they dictate. Now, my intention is to change the territorial integrity over time, largely through democratic means, right? But to change that dynamic, you know, so to me, the territorial integrity is not sacrosanct.
Decide to get together in the Pacific Northwest and democratically, over a period of 20 years, take a city.
That's what they've done over the whole United States already.
Hold on.
I know what you're saying.
I mean, as nationalist. Not as like, oh yeah, I just want to live around white people and like, it just happens to work that way and we kind of keep it going. I mean, nationalist. Do you support their right to having a white nation state as much as you support your right to have a black nation state?
No.
Why?
Because I don't have to support their right. Their right. So for me, when you have they have a government effectively already. They're not a people lacking self-determination. The white nation state is the state. Their flag is the flag. Their police is the police. Their FBI is the FBI. The Supreme Court that their nation established is the Supreme Court. So that's
the American nation, though. I'm talking about a white nationalist nation.
Yeah, they say they're Americans, though. They don't say they're not Americans. This is a white nationalist nation state effectively right now. Then it's not.
Come on.
Nationalists don't run the government.
Fuck out of here.
But it is a nation state. Who could vote besides white men when the nation was established?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If that was a value that you think is valuable,
when did that state cease to exist?
I don't know the first
So
time
what
that
I'm
other
saying
people were
is-
allowed to vote. I'm not a historian.
Right, but
You know.
No, what I'm saying is that the state, the right to self-determination means the right of a people to determine their own destiny, acting as a unit. They're not separate and distinct from their white people who
They
decided
are,
to.
though, because there are a small percentage of people
They're
who
not a separate
believe
nation.
that they need
They're
a
an
separate place only for themselves.
They're an ideologically different community. That's the difference between the right to self-determination is a right that applies to nations, to people. They're not separate. So they're not separate and distinct from the other white people in America.
And that
They're not a separate and distinct
on that,
nation.
on that alone, you think, boom, it's now
The
unjust.
right to self-determination is a right to nations, period. To have a government of their own. Now, they're not a separate and distinct nation. They're a political community. That's different. They are a political minority. You know, so they're not a separate and distinct nation. So
once you define yourself as such, you think that it will be reasonable.
I would say based on
Because you could argue that black
international
people
norms,
are Americans and that you have a political minority.
that argument is made.
Yeah.
In the
That's
same
why you
way
don't
that
got from a fucking nation. That's why.
No.
I mean, that's why you don't have a state.
That's why we are. But not only do we not have a state, we don't have there's not a true national consciousness. There's a general, what might loosely be termed black consciousness. I recognize that I'm not white, I'm black, right? That is a lower level of consciousness, you know. But there's not a true, a national consciousness is not something that just pops up. It's something that is forged intentionally. You know, it's in the same way that class consciousness, you know, this is something that's spoken to in sometimes communist theory when they discuss that.
Ew. Keep going.
You know, so workers can spontaneously decide through living and working under poor conditions to come together to improve their working conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Trade union consciousness can emerge spontaneously. But socialist consciousness, the idea that working people should control the means of production and change the economic system, that's not something that just comes about spontaneously. It's a concept that has to effectively be brought in from the outside. National consciousness is largely the same for most peoples.
So, what you described to me is a spell.
It's not a spell.
Like, I have to educate you about how you have been fucked.
It's not just how you've been fucked.
I think that same amount of
it's not just
energy spent being like, this is how we define a nation. This is why you are a nation, and we need a state. I think that energy could be spent improving the actual daily living states of black people.
And then what?
And I think that will be valuable.
No more than it was to improve the daily living states of Jews in Germany or Russia or Poland.
But motherfucker, they're not coming for us right now.
They weren't coming for them right then. No, and
I don't have a belief or a fear that I'm going to be round up and exterminated.
It's not just a question that you're going to be rounded up.
Do you think that's a real possibility?
Rounding up and extermination Nazis.
Because you brought that up twice.
But it's not
the
just
Jews in Germany. You brought that up twice.
With
maybe
respect
3
to
times.
identity. With respect to identity.
Yeah,
and what I'm saying is,
but that's sensitive.
You know
like, you're a smart motherfucker. You know what you're doing.
But you know what they said? You know what they used to say in Germany?
What?
Germany's not Poland. Germany is... Because Germany wasn't Germany in the way it's Germany now until after the Second World War in the eyes of the world. Germany was an advanced culture. Germany, they had a Jewish foreign minister in Germany in the 1920s. They didn't have a Jewish foreign minister, Secretary of State in America until Kissinger in the 1970s because he fled Germany.
And then
what I'm saying is things went way left. But I'm saying things went way left real quick for people who thought it was not possible that it could never happen here. We're not in backwards Tsarist Russia with illiterate Russian peasants. We're not in backwards Poland. We are in civilized, cultured Germany. Until they weren't. But it's not a question just Germany. Golda Meir, who became a prime minister of Israel, and this is a question of whether or not one accepts that situation.
You flipped on that
but there are very few stateless peoples in the world. especially very few stateless peoples that are part of diasporic communities. So that would be one. The Kurds are don't have a huge diaspora. They're a stateless nation.
Yes.
But wherever you find peoples that are nations that are under foreign rule, you find them subjugated.
Yes.
You know, and the question is, why is our situation getting worse? And I think it's because we are laboring under a bad diagnosis. The bad diagnosis is that you are an American person deprived of rights. And that is why you are impoverished. That's why your education is inferior. This was the justification of the entire civil rights movement.
I don't think that's true. Not now.
Elaborate.
I don't think that black people are deprived of rights today.
That's right. But what I'm saying is this was the reason why the civil rights movement came into being, as opposed to a broader national liberation movement. Mm-hmm. The diagnosis was you are Americans deprived of your rights. And that's why your children do poorly. You know, the whole Brown versus the Board of Education, they had the doll test.
Yes,
you know, what is the good doll? The white doll is the good one. That's a smart doll. Everyone has seen this, right?
Yeah.
And the idea was this is because of segregation. You know, it creates a sense of inferiority. It is because of our segregated situation, our denial of rights, that our situation is so poorly in this country. So obviously, that's what's holding us back. So to improve the situation, remove those barriers. So then why is the situation worse?
Because new barriers are added.
Are so many new barriers added that are worse than the barriers that existed then?
Yes.
Elaborate.
Family, drug laws.
That's not a... So what barrier broke up the family?
Drug laws help break up the family.
Okay. Drug laws.
And like the systematic education of black women that niggas ain't shit. Those things.
That's not a new thing.
I'm just saying.
That's not a
That's
new
carried over. Right? No, here's
that was there before,
here's all I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But what I'm saying is this.
So you get rights, right? But we can strip those rights if you got weed on you.
Who's the we that can strip?
The government.
No, who's the we?
The government.
A we that's other than you is my point. When you say we, you know what I'm saying? It's we. Like, it's a we that's not including us. It's like
even if all those people were fucking
who's
black.
Who's stripping those rights?
Even if all those people were black.
No, what I'm saying is, you said, who's stripping those rights?
Whatever government you live under. Like the government.
The government is stripping those rights.
Do I think that those are targeted?
Whether they're targeted or not.
I think they are. I think they are targeted.
Okay. So you have this other that is systematically in a targeted fashion.
But wait, hold on, slow down.
Stripping your rights.
I don't think that the rights angle was the wrong angle. I think that was the right angle.
Elaborate.
Because I don't believe that it's realistic to get black people to physically move as giant groups to a different part of the country and establish a true state.
Why?
I don't think that's realistic. I just don't think people are like that by nature. I think a small percentage will. That's why there's some people that live in fucking Israel and there's Jews around the corner. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's completely realistic. I think that there are people who would be interested in that. And if that opportunity arose, they would take it. But I think for the most part, black people would be living wherever the fuck they're living right now. And those rights serve them very, very well. What doesn't serve them are drug laws, the way that black men are treated, not just by by white people, but by other black people. Now, is that informed by a white media?
It's not just white people.
Maybe.
It's not the fact that they happen to be white. Wherever you have national oppression, you have this. The Chechens could be considered white.
Yes, I understand.
The Russians murder the Chechens.
The idea of other is outside of race.
Other, but nation that has... So, and I think there's a huge distinction that has to be made between how relationships originate. And in this, you can see the differences of peoples in the society. Black people are not suffering these consequences. The descendants of enslaved Africans are. Nigerians are not disproportionately going to jail and being murdered. They're outperforming whites.
Yes.
Right? They're black. The skin color has never been the fundamental question. It's a question of the historic relationship that you have with the society. Were you conquered by... So is your relationship with this society voluntary or involuntary? And where you find the people who are at the bottom rungs of the society, in this society, you can see that these are peoples whose relationship with America is involuntary. They didn't migrate to be Americans.
But if a person that looks like you can be successful, then so can you.
What sense does that make? What sense does that make?
Or you can't say that skin color is a barrier. Now, you're not saying that.
I'm not saying that it's not a barrier. It certainly can be.
It's not the most significant barrier.
But it's not the reason that
you
we as a collective are in the state that we are in.
Is that shared cultural idea. It's that you have been subjugated, that you continue to be subjugated, and because of that, you are limited into what you can achieve or accomplish in this country as it stands today.
Yeah, and you just get a little racism kicker on top of that. But
if you came in from Nigeria, your parents were not slaves in the same sense.
They were not.
They may. Who knows? Who knows what the fuck was happening in Nigeria?
They were not enslaved.
But they were not enslaved by someone that does not look like you.
They were not enslaved by Americans,
right?
In the sense you were not their niggas, right? So that's. Yeah.
But when you come here, you look like them.
And
if the system was set up to systematically treat you that way, how come so many Nigerians come over here and make it work?
But how do they come over here? As children, so they come over here. Who's coming over here? They're not a nation. Why doesn't Nigeria work? Since Nigerians do so well, why does Nigeria work? What comes over here is the Nigerian All-Star team.
Yes, the All-Star team.
Okay, so it's not.
No, here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying.
You get the Nigerian All-Star.
I don't think it would be more difficult to change more black people into black All-Stars than it would. I think it would be more difficult to make them a nation who understood that they were a nation and put them in a state where they could then govern themselves. I think that's a much harder thing to take on than to teach them that there is no difference between them and that Nigerian except for their mindset and their background and their work ethic.
When there becomes no difference, then the distinction that is benefiting the Nigerian now will just become a hindrance to him. It's not a situation that you will be able to succeed more if you just change your mindset and your work ethic. You know, that's asinine.
Why?
So the reason being is that within this society, it's not just a question. So there's national oppression, but yes, there's also racism and discrimination, but it is linked to your linkage to that historical experience for the same reason that the Irish were looked down upon.
Yes, but like when someone sees a dark-skinned person in America, they don't think to themselves, is that person from here or not?
It's not. That's
you
actually
black
not necessarily
until you
the
open
case.
your mouth.
Yeah.
You black. So you a nigga.
But
until you open your mouth.
The things that are decisive in your life happen, with the exception of some random incident with the police, happen after you open your mouth. So when you go on a job interview, whether or not you get that job is determined by what happens after you. It can be determined by whether or not you got the interview. Whether you can look, your name can be a certain thing.
Yeah.
But getting the interview can be determined by whether your name is a Nigerian name, could help you in some cases, and having a name that's associated.
Davinte, nigga names.
Yeah. So can hinder you, and it has hindered you, and so you have people who change their names. There's a woman I know whose name was Chardonnay. Right? Chardonnay, right? Educated sister, graduate degree. She just calls herself Chard, right? On her resume, she doesn't put Chardonnay.
Because she's not fucking stupid.
Why? But what I'm saying is,
because
nothing underneath the name changes if her name is Chardonnay. All the things that
nor did she give her that name.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is all those things that should qualify you for a position, they don't change because of the name that's at the top of it. So why does she take the Chardonnay off?
Because she's not fucking stupid.
And she knows that what?
She knows that someone can look at that name and put judgment upon her. But if you
what kind of judgment?
Hold on. If you think a girl named Stormy or Misty or Crystal with that same fucking good resume, they're going to get judged like, oh, you probably didn't have a dad. You're probably from a fucking trailer park. Chardonnay's going to get the same fucking treatment as Misty.
No.
Yes, the fuck she is.
No,
I
disagree.
Stephanie and Heather get better treatment. And Char will get better treatment. But Chardonnay gonna get fucked over. But so will Misty and Stormy.
But Misty and Stormy.
If you name your kid some dumbass shit that
No.
places them in a permanent underclass, you're fucking with their future.
Certainly.
That's
but what
it.
I'm saying is no. The
So
stigma
she
is
knows-
not the same. The stigma is not the same
It's not the same
at all.
because there's less Stormies than there are Chardonnays.
There are probably more Stormies than there are Chardonnays.
I'm just
I
saying,
don't
there's
know.
more Jennifers.
There are many more Jennifers, but why the discrimination? That's class discrimination still, yes.
That's what we're talking
But
about.
no, we're not just talking about class discrimination.
Because Chardonnay doesn't mean that you're black.
Chardonnay
Means you're trashy.
No, it doesn't.
LaQuisha means you're black.
Chardonnay. How many white Chardonnays do you know?
I bet you can find one.
You probably could.
Your mama's a stripper. Your name's Chardonnay. Your name Mercedes. Your name
Right.
Lexus.
But the point
There's white girls named Lexus too.
Yeah.
Their moms are strippers too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
I'm just saying.
But
But LaQuisha is a more relevant name than Chardonnay.
But the question is not actually. For the point of the question, it's not in this sense. The question was, are
She
you
changed her
altering
name
for
to
what
conceal
purpose?
her background.
Absolutely, not her economic class
And
background.
not her ethnic background.
Yes, her ethnic background.
Chardonnay does not fucking give you
so
ethnic
not
background.
in your mind. In your mind, maybe it doesn't.
LaQuisha does.
No. What I'm speaking of is the society didn't change her name. The actual person with the actual name had to make a conscious decision to change their name, and they had an actual reason.
They wanted to be successful.
But they felt the name prevented them from being successful for ethnic reasons. Now, whether that's the case or not,
That's wrong. It's
no,
class
no.
reasons.
You're saying that
class
this is, no.
reasons.
You're saying that is going to be the primary determination, and then of course first names come with last names too. So I don't know.
So Chardonnay Watkins.
So maybe her name. I don't remember what her last name was. So maybe it was. It could have just been. It could have been the combination. But her concern was not class reasons. Her concern, and this is the thing about living as a permanent marginal minority,
but
is that you invent. So because you live in a society where your life is dictated to. Listen, no, let me get to the period, and then you come, and then you respond. So the problem of being a permanent marginal minority is that you are thinking about what might offend, even if the conclusion that you're drawing may not be drawn by that dominant grouping. You are always on the lookout for these things. So her justification was that. Now you're saying that's not what they would have read. Maybe you could be right. You could be wrong. She could be right. And that might have been exactly what a given grouping of people would have looked into it, because they say a white girl who would have had this name never went to college. Maybe. I don't know. But
she's doing Oxy somewhere at a trailer park.
But nevertheless, the thing is that she reached this conclusion for that reason. Whether that's the determination that they would have made,
that's her mindset.
It's a different thing. But it's not just a mindset that you just come up with. It's a mindset that comes from.
She wasn't wrong.
She wasn't wrong that she would be discriminated. You're saying it would have just been class based, and I'm saying she has good reason to fear that it could have been at least.
I don't disagree with you there.
At least both.
I don't disagree with you there.
But that is part of being an oppressed community, that you start having to figure out what about just being who you are can draw offense from the dominant community in a way that can hinder your capacity to live.
Yes.
So
now,
in East
Cleveland,
for instance,
slow down.
Go ahead.
So now, let's talk about that name thing.
It's not just the name, but it's everything.
No.
We're
talking about names.
Part of it, yeah.
If you have to change your name or modify your name to have a better shot, it would have been a lot cooler if you could have gone back to before you were born and modify your fucking parents. Like,
okay.
Like,
but what's the point?
Here's the point. It's a broken system that allows people to name their children names like Chardonnay.
Why?
A broken family system.
No.
Would you ever fucking name your kid something like that?
I don't have children.
Would you ever name your dog something like that?
But that wouldn't be my choice.
Why?
I wouldn't. It wouldn't be my choice.
You don't know why?
But
or you just don't want to disavow other black people?
No.
Why?
No.
Why wouldn't you name your kid Chardonnay?
I don't think it's a good name.
Why?
This sounds ridiculous to me.
Okay.
Right, but
it sounds ridiculous to you.
As a name, I wouldn't name my child Apple or a lot of other things that people
name their children. A lot of dumb shit, right?
But
you would name your kids something that gave them a fucking chance because you have foresight.
Not just that gave them a chance, but what I'm saying is, the thing is...
There's a reason you wouldn't name your kid Chardonnay There's a reason you wouldn't name your kid
No, listen.
Apple.
Yeah, but
because you want them to have
but
a
the
fucking
choice
chance.
that you give, it's not just that you want them to have a chance. You know, like people you like, there are names that you like. Sometimes you give your child a name that has a particular meaning.
Yes.
So
all
you give
those
them,
things.
and
But
you
have
don't
enough
give a child
context.
a name necessarily that would harm them. But the question is, who's making this determination? So there were just like Italians came to this country and changed not some off the wall name, but a name that would have been a normal
They're
name.
concealing Italianness. That's what you're saying. They
Yes,
conceal their Italianness.
And
that sucks.
By who?
And that sucks.
Right.
But what I'm saying is,
Until-
no one's forcing you to name your kid Chardonnay or Jaquante.
But what I'm saying is,
No one's
what I'm
forcing
saying
you to
is,
do that
one,
shit.
I wouldn't say Chardonnay or Alizé is the same as even some other name, which may seem to some people to be overly ethnic, but doesn't have the same negative connotation as naming your kid after alcohol or drugs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So what's wrong? What makes LaQuisha a bad name?
LaQuisha's a bad name because I don't think LaQuisha has a fucking dad.
Why?
Because I'm a fucking racist.
Right, but what I'm
Because I
saying
was raised
is,
in America. Slow down. I'm telling you why. Because I was raised in America, and I've met lots of black people, and I've never met a LaQuisha who had a whole bunch of shit going for her. Never met her.
well, here's the
Never
other
met
thing. I have.
a black dude with more than a la or a duh in front of his name that had a whole lot of shit going for him.
Yeah, well, I have. But the thing is,
Haven't met him. No, here's what I'm saying. So if your name is LaQuante, and you're coming up in the hood, I think you have a tough go when it comes to like fill out job applications.
but why?
Because the world is racist.
Because who's making those decisions?
No, wait, slow down. It doesn't matter.
No, it does. It makes all the difference in the world.
No,
You said the world is racist.
because when you get your black nation, and some kid is named fucking Prince, and some kid is named Amir, and some kid is named Jordash. Jordash doesn't get the fucking job because
Says who?
it'll be a different context. But
Says
the
who?
same shit will play out. You will know who the trash is.
No.
And you will
First
make
of all-
those judgments.
First
like,
of all,
oh, it's not. There won't be any trash in the black nation.
we
gonna
will
take
look
care
at
of-
children as
We're gonna
trash.
take care of everyone.
Well, perhaps
Perhaps not.
perhaps not. But perhaps judgments like
It
that.
all ends up being
no,
the same.
No, it doesn't.
Someone's gonna get picked last, motherfucker. Like,
Somebody will end up getting picked last.
and
Certainly.
someone's gonna be a stripper.
But the criterion, not necessarily. But
Oh yeah, there's no prostitution. It's just black people.
No, you don't. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. The thing is
No,
that
no, of course
the
not.
thing is we're not talking about some kind of utopia that's going to sprout up. It's going to be built with people, actual people,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be just black people. If you're a white person, you live in Mississippi, you shouldn't have to move from Mississippi. You should have a right
Mississippi.
to stay in Mississippi or Alabama or Louisiana or
whatever
South
state I want.
Carolina, you know, or Georgia.
Like, I'm looking into a lot of real estate.
You know, or wherever it is possible for people to gather and become self-determining. But so there'll be people there. The population will diminish because you see what happens when under white control, black people just move next to white people when they run the government. So if you have a situation even before you have a state, will be the case, where the states still under the American government are dominated by the black population politically, where they become the dominant political power in the state. Even prior to that, as it happens in more and more cities, the population of whites who are used to being boss will leave. They don't want to live next door to you when they're boss. They definitely don't want to live next door to you when you're boss. You know, even if you're not seeking, and they will feel oppressed just by not being able to oppress you. They feel oppressed.
That's some cold shit.
You know, but this is the reality. They feel oppressed when you start telling them. This is like if you say change the name from the Cleveland Indians because it's offensive. They feel
Offensive
oppressed.
to who?
I'm saying when it's said.
Wait,
to
are you on
country,
that? What should their
do I
name be?
support that? I don't know what their name should be. I'm against it being the Indians.
Why?
Because it is a point of contention for people who are actually people whose territory was conquered by Americans.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and who were largely exterminated by Americans. Now, the fact that they named the team after they said it's some Indian dude, you know, and he liked it, you know, but maybe he didn't like it. What was his position to say to white people who had power to name fucking sports teams that I don't like it, you know? He was still to them a subjugated person. So you say you pretend and say you like a lot of stuff when you are an unempowered human being. So, of course, so...
I just don't buy this narrative that, like, the Cleveland Indians is the same thing as calling it, like, the Cleveland niggas. Or, like...
Why is it different?
Because I don't believe that Indian is a fucking derogatory term.
You don't think it's a derogatory term. It may not be the same as calling it the niggas, but...
Because I've heard people who have that skin tone...
call themselves Indians.
Yes.
What about the Cleveland Negroes?
I'm not going to trip.
You may not
I just don't think it'll pass.
But what I'm saying is Negroes today would be considered to be a derogatory term.
I don't think it would work.
No, I'm saying the Negroes today is considered a derogatory term. It wasn't at the time. There are people who feel differently about the term Indian among the pre-Columbian inhabitants.
But why? Why? Because people told them to get fucking offended.
No, not because people told them to get offended.
I think so, man. Straight up. It was like people gave you the right to be fucking offended, and a bunch of fucking... white college kids got upset about some bullshit
because the term
and
Indians,
now they've come to age.
Because the term Indians is just another example of the pervasive nature of the white conqueror society to just name some shit and make it stick. So you had a name.
Well, then start conquering some shit. Look, history gets written by the motherfucker that wins.
No, so this is my
I'm not mad at that.
So Indians.
It happens in fighting. That's the culture I come from.
So people who were part of nations that existed, that had languages and cultures and names, some always were offended at the term Indian. It was never something
it's not something that's really attached to them. And I understand
and this is how this shows the just, you know, how the Americans are more Trump than Trump. So it's clear to everybody now that that Columbus thought he was going to India and then just said, these is Indians. Because he thought he was going to India. But then they know that was the wrong shit, right? That they didn't go to India. That these people, whatever they should be called, is probably not Indians, right? But they just said, nah, these are Indians. You're an Indian. And we just going to make it stick. In spite of the fact that we know even the basis of it was wrong.
Yes.
You just Indians because we said so. And then have you saying and make it stick so much so that you conquer people, and then they, at some point, some of them begin to use the name that you gave them in error, even though they had a name before you knew this place existed. Mm-hmm. And they use the name that you called them in error to define themselves. That's a hell of a thing. That's a hell of a kind
it's a hell of a thing
subjugation
in real
oppression.
Life.
Mm-hmm. In real life,
it's not a hell of a thing for a sports team.
It's a hell of a thing for a sports team because it's a manifestation of their naked dominance over the subjugated people.
That is a crazy reach.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
So like, that they don't. Not only do they have to not give up territory or recognize you as a people, now they won't even give you a sports team. They won't even change the name of the sports team. Why you gotta stay the Indians? So why fight for it? So here's the thing. Why are you fighting really to honor this one Indian guy that they say the team was named after?
I'm not fighting for shit. I'm just saying.
I'm saying why if it's a controversy at all, and even one Indian says we don't like this.
Fuck them.
Why hold on to it?
Because it's one dude and a bunch of fucking white people.
It's more than one dude. But
15 dudes. There's only 30 of these niggas left.
There are several million people.
I'm just kidding.
I know, but they're all.
Stop shaking your head, Anthony. Look at you side with this motherfucker.
But there's several million of these people.
Remember who you came with, motherfucker.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, this is what makes America the actual evil empire. It's worse than the Soviet Union.
It's me.
No, it's what it has done to you. But that makes it. But the fact that not only can it do these things, but it can do these things and make it almost as if it doesn't exist. So you can go to a college campus, and you can see white students protesting against
Anthony, please
Zionism.
bear me.
And they can say free Palestine and Zionism.
And they
is
love
unjust.
to say that shit. They love it.
And they can have a point that the occupation is unjust, right? So they can say this, right? But they can also say that and have no problem being pro-American. So to be anti-Israel, and what are the things that they say make them anti-Israel? Because it's not their land; they took it over. They kill the natives.
I understand you.
To be anti-Israel and to be pro-American is to be anti-murder and pro-genocide. But they can say it with no sense of hypocrisy, feeling like they're for social justice, because America has done the best job in the world at PR. The average American doesn't even know that there are territories. The average American doesn't know what American Samoa is.
Or Guam.
Or the U.S.
Respect.
Virgin Islands.
I'm with you. I understand.
Or that there's a distinction to be made between people who are immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants. Yeah, America is, and I'm not an immigrant. And the people of Guam are not immigrants, and Hawaiians were not immigrants. Some immigrants came and conquered us. And our relationship has been non-consensual from the start. And that's the fundamental difference.
Yes. Now,
and at any point, we have a right to sever
once you are born,
that relationship.
once you are born, and you are not subject to that relationship.
How are you? What do you?
Hold on. You're not directly subject to that relationship, and you have the rights afforded to everybody else in that country. Wait. What is wrong with deciding that a better outcome is assimilation into what I believe is the best manifestation of what a country could be that we have available to us? Show me a country better. Where would you rather live?
Well, I would rather live in Mississippi.
No, motherfucker. No.
But.
No. Existing countries.
Canada.
Canada's better? Fuck Canada. I was just there. Fuck Canada.
Okay.
Fuck Canada.
So what I'm saying is,
fuck Canada right in the ear.
Listen, I appreciate. Maybe you had a bad experience in Canada. Okay.
I had a couple.
Okay. You may have. Okay. You know I love you because I'm doing this, right? So
what?
No, but there's.
You said Canada. I said fuck Canada.
What I'm saying is that Canada, when you say a better country, if you use objective metrics, then there's no.
You know, in Canada they call black dudes fella like it's no big deal.
Wherever these people have been, that's another settler country.
I'm just saying.
It's another settler imperialist country.
But what I'm saying is, if one says what makes a better thing, healthcare is better and more accessible. So there are metrics that countries are judged by. More socialist. So you like it?
I don't like it at all.
I'm kidding.
But there are metrics that countries can be judged by that are objective. And then you could say, what countries are better. You could say what countries educate their people better. People have better outcomes on average. There are several countries that fit that metric. Almost all of the Western European countries would fit that metric.
I can't think of any country I'd rather be in.
That's a personal choice, and I understand that for some people, they would have, for some people, it doesn't matter. For some people, all of Ireland should have just moved to America. But there's some people who appreciate the ability to live in their own country and to be self-determining there. And to say, I don't want to have to go to America. I want to be Irish in Ireland. Even though there are many more Irish in America than there are on the island of Ireland. Well, 5 million people in Ireland. 5-6 million people. But that doesn't mean that we just be, or that better yet, that we should just be British. That what was the point? We shouldn't have fought a war for independence. Even the Americans who were British fought a war to separate from the British.
No, respect. I'm not trying to rewrite any of that.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is that it's interesting that if you look at the Americans who were English, everything they had came as a byproduct of the active support of the British government. They didn't just come to America. They came with the protection and lived under the protection of the British government, the Crown. And then they said, well, we want A, B, and C that you're not willing to grant us. And for these things,
so fuck y'all.
We will fight a revolutionary war. against the country that sponsored our being here. And many of the founders did quite well under that country and its protection. Here you have people who have completely involuntary relationships with America, who have done horribly from beginning to present. Not just our people, but all the peoples who've been under American rule. And you can look at the state of these peoples and the length of time that they've been under.
Who are these other peoples?
Like what people would call the Native Americans, ourselves, the Puerto Ricans, the people of the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, Americans.
Do you believe that
Hawaiians.
the Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico or the Puerto Ricans who have moved to America?
Puerto Ricans and Puerto Rico both, but Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Ricans who have moved to America.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that they deserve a state?
They deserve Puerto Rico.
Okay. So if you're a New York born,
Then,
like your parents are both Puerto Rican.
yeah, you're not gonna have.
You were born in New York.
The Bronx is not gonna be a republic.
Why? Because they weren't slaves?
Because they're not a nation in the Bronx. They're a nation in Puerto Rico. They were forged into a nation
Because they have a state.
They don't have a state. There's an island that's governed by America, just as Mississippi.
But it wasn't always governed by America.
It was governed by.
So because they have a
foreign
land,
people,
because they have a land,
no,
they don't get another one.
No, they were forged into a people on that land. That land gave birth to the people. The historical development that happened on that land created the Puerto Rican, which was a thing that did not exist prior. From African slaves, indigenous people, and European settler, a Puerto Rican was born. You know, and there's argument that can be made that Puerto Rican portions of them are really new Africans too. You know, we have Puerto Rico.
Well, all right. So no. But there's a funny interaction I saw online between rappers. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with Fat Joe?
I'm familiar with Fat Joe.
So Fat Joe, light-skinned Puerto Rican dude. Mm-hmm. He's sitting across from a dude that's Cuban. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Are you Cuban or are you Afro-Cuban?" And he was like, "Well, my parents are of Spanish descent." And like you can see Fat Joe just kind of turn, like, who else is in the room? Like he was just disinterested in this motherfucker all of a sudden. Like,
But that has its origins in the same thing.
He was like, "Well, I'm black." Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen very many Puerto Rican dudes
say they're black.
Say they are black. Uh-huh. They will use the word nigga, and they will say that they are niggas. Mm-hmm. They will call their children my nigga.
For some people, especially being coming from a colonized territory, the sense of national identity trumps what we consider
the racial identity. Do you think that's the same in Brazil?
In parts of Brazil.
Because like a lot of times,
all of Brazil,
people that I see and I'm like, "Oh, that's a black man."
But Brazil,
I'll ask them if they're black and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm Brazilian."
Because they're not fighting. That's also, there's some self-hatred there too. But
no, if you ask me, are you black or are you American? I would say I am black. Mm-hmm. If you made it R, like one or the other.
If you had to choose, yeah.
I would say I'm black. Uh-huh. But I'm an American. I was raised here.
Okay.
This is my country.
Right on. You choose. Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, it's your country. You were raised there. If you were taken to France and you were born in France,
I'd be there.
You say you'd be French.
If I were born there and I was raised there, yes.
Well, okay. So to me, the answer would be no. Now I understand why people.
No, would I ever say I am not of African descent?
No, but you can say you're an American. But the question is, what is an American? And the thing that I love, I don't know if you've ever read the Dred Scott decision.
I haven't read it verbatim. I know that you have.
I recommend that you do. But it's one of the most significant legal documents. People talk about how it was a horrible decision. I think it was a great decision. It was an honest piece of jurisprudence. When they ask, are these people Americans? And then they say, and he says, Justice Tate says, I think they're not. But he doesn't say, I think they're not. He goes and said, well, what makes a person an American? And then says, are these people this? These people, none of them came here voluntarily. All of them were subjugated. And they didn't draw distinction between even the native populations they call the Indians or whatever, and our people, other peoples. And then he says, and then he doesn't even make always the most the most elaborate legal case. He appeals to the common sense. So basically, let's be real. If these niggas are citizens, what you're telling me that they got a right to assemble wherever they want with guns, right? Like that. While they got cousins enslaved, they can all gather together. So these Americans, you telling me these Americans? So Americans, they should be protected by the Bill of Rights. They should be able to assemble wherever they want with guns and organize political parties and do these things.
Yes, they should.
They should be able to sit on juries and judge you and your kids. And you want these niggas, you would be happy going to trial. You know.
Tell them more about Dred Scott King.
I thought the purpose, well, people can be listening, but I wasn't giving a speech. You know, the idea
it was more of a conversation.
But yeah, I think that is a significant aspect. Is that at what point did you become an American? If you say you're an American, you as an individual, but a part of a collective, at what point did that happen? If you were not an American in 1619, because this is the 400th anniversary of 1619.
Right.
If you were not an American in 1619, there was no America then, but you were a piece of property bought and sold like any other commodity. From that point, certainly until the Civil War, 1619 to 1865.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's over 200 years.
Right.
Almost 250 years. So for 250 years, between the first enslaved African person being brought here and the Civil War, 250 years, where there can be no pretense that you were an American, that you were...
I really push that.
Okay, so we'll go a little bit back, right? So when you say you feel that you're an American,
yes.
We were talking about the Dred Scott decision where he says, no, they're not, and he gives his reasoning as to why they are not. And he says that they're not citizens, cannot be citizens effectively, and his conclusion is that they can be reduced to any level for the white man's benefit and have no rights. Not have no rights. He didn't just leave it at that. But he doesn't have no rights which the white man is bound to respect. And to me, this is the de facto law of the land today. You have no rights which the white man is bound to respect because you have no capacity to create any significant consequences over and above the objection of the white society. No rights which the white man is bound to respect is to me the law of the land. But
well, that's just a numbers game, really.
It's more than a numbers game, and we would be losing the numbers game even because America is not just white. The problem is America, even if America becomes majority non-white, because the immigrants to America become Americans. Even if they're not white, they become Americans. Mm-hmm. They are people who have voluntarily come freely into the society to join this political community that is founded on the denial of your right to self-determination.
No, that's not what it's founded on.
Yes, it is.
No, that assisted its economic prowess.
No.
I don't think it was not founded on the denial of anything.
Yes,
that's a part of how it got ahead.
That's an official
Did it subjugate a group of people? No, did America subjugate people that look exactly like me in order to get economic prowess over the world, which it still has to this day?
And conquered other people and cleared the land of those people. So founded on these were the things that made it America.
That's not what people come to be Americans for.
They come to
benefit. That's disingenuous. That's a
They
bullshit.
don't come to America because isn't it great that they killed the Indians?
They come here because they killed the Indians. And because there was slavery. There's greater economic chance for them to survive well with their families.
Absolutely. They come here to reap the benefits of your subjugation.
No.
Yes.
Those things are also facts.
They are facts. They don't come here with that in mind.
They don't come here. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They come here with the current state in mind. Now, the current state is created.
It's based on that. That is a part of the current. That's how the current state came into being and how the current state is maintained. They come here only because of the current state. They do not come here.
I don't buy that that's why it's maintained.
It is maintained that way.
It would be better if black people were doing better. No. It's not doing better because black people are doing worse.
It's not just better.
It would be better if every black person.
No. It's not just black people. America would not be doing better if it gave the right to self-determination to all the peoples it governs against
That's
their
not
will.
what I said.
Yeah, so that's where I was going with that point. When I said
Well, that's what you want.
no, that's what
I'm saying. If all the marginalized people that you identify as different nations, if en masse they were doing quite well,
But what does quite well mean?
it means the same percentages of white people who do well.
No, but what? No. See, this is what I'm saying.
Because then
Their
it would be
they
equal.
So equal is not equal when some people crafted a society on the basis of their values.
You know what? The
And you have
crafting of the
not.
society where
It is.
like it's a fixed thing. It can be. It's constantly in flux.
It changes to an extent. But the fundamentals of the society don't change with respect to the basis of the relationship of that society to certain peoples that it's subjugated.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, I don't have to just accommodate myself to having a better relationship within a non-consensual relationship. So when, for instance, if
I understand what you're saying.
if I force you into a marriage, or I force a young woman into a marriage, and I'm abusive to that young woman, she doesn't have to just say, well, look, this guy has money and your life would be better if he'd been hitting you 10 times a week. He only hit you once last week.
Right.
You know, and she said, well, if he never hit me, I don't want to be in this relationship. I don't want a bigger slice of the pie. I don't like pie. I like cake. So maybe I'm allergic to pie. I fucking hate pie. And you just telling me I can get a bigger slice. And that's all I can aspire to because
That's
pie
not what
is
I'm
the
telling
only
you.
thing on the menu.
No. See, that's
a
where you
bigger
get it
slice.
fucked up. Pie's not the only thing on the menu. What's on the menu is whatever the fuck you can make.
No, what's on the menu is
What's on the
whatever-
menu is whatever the fuck you can make.
No.
That's what's on the menu.
Because they took something off
And this
the
is
menu.
the best country
They took something
to make
off
some
the
shit.
menu, and the menu is whatever you want.
No.
what
That's
I'm
the
saying
narrative
is-
you need.
No, that's not what I need because the thing that is taken off the menu up front is your right to be self-determining. Your right to decide to not be in this relationship. So you can.
Yes.
That
Because
is.
you're in another relationship. You're already dating America, motherfucker.
I'm not dating America.
No,
America.
I'm not saying you.
Drag me. I'm not saying me. I'm saying us. We're not dating America. America. We were walking down the street. America snatched us and put us in the fucking car. We're not dating America.
Snatch someone that looked like you.
No, us.
Snatch
Snatch
someone
us.
that looked like you.
No. So that's like saying
Our grandpa owned a business. We are not slaves.
he owned a business. So
I'm just
what?
saying.
I'm saying so
I
Castro.
don't know any slaves.
So Castro. So for instance, Castro kidnapped the young women. They had them in his basement. Some of them got pregnant and had a baby. Right? And baby in there with the mother, and then to pretend like, hey, kid. You know, you were kidnapped and forced into a relationship, but the situation with the kid should still be a member of my family. So if you get out, that don't change that the kid should leave. Like, maybe you want to leave because I did harm to you, but the kid should still be my kid or part of our family, not part of your family.
Look.
The kid got to stay with the kidnappers. What I'm saying is that as a people, we are an entire people with Stockholm syndrome. You fell for the kidnapper.
How dare
you? Fall for the kidnapper, and now you identify with the goddamn kidnapper.
I don't identify with the kidnapper any more than I identify with the one that's been kidnapped.
But what I'm saying is that
At this point, I decide that they are bound by something that will not be separated,
why not?
but can be overcome.
It can be separated too. And what I'm saying,
And I don't believe that separation equals overcoming. I think
say
that you
there's
can
no
have
overcoming
separation
without separation,
and have poverty and despair
You
like
can.
fucking Indians have.
You can have.
Oh, I'm
they
sorry.
don't have,
Indian is not the proper term.
but no matter to put it was the fucking in front of it that made it more offensive than just the Indian.
I don't give
but
a fuck.
I didn't say you did. That's been established. But what I'm saying is that it's not just poverty, and they don't have self-determination. They have gas and cigarette independence.
And
So you
casinos.
get to be.
Don't stop.
So you get to.
They get casinos.
Some have casinos. Most reservations don't have anything approximating a viable casino.
I'm just saying.
But what do you live? You live under subjugation. You have no real independence. So
No?
they don't have a right. No.
Why don't they?
can India, can the Lakota Sioux? Well, obviously they can't even stop a fucking pipeline being pushed through their territory.
Why can't they?
Because they just tried and they could not.
But like, why can't they?
Because the American government is
it possible?
Truly sovereign.
Is
There's
it
no
possible
true
that their
sovereignty.
tactics were not proper?
But what I'm saying is, if you
is that possible?
Their tactics always can be proper or improper.
Let's just stand here and talk some shit.
No, they didn't. One, they didn't just stand there. But the question is, they're not independent.
That's what the nation
a
saw.
A nation state has a right to just say no. You can't just put a pipeline through Mexico without the approval of Mexico.
Correct.
You can do that to them because they're not a sovereign people in reality. They're gas and cigarette independence. They're not really they're not sovereign. They can't.
So that reservation model doesn't work.
The reservation model is shit. They can't decide as an independent people, like other independent peoples do, that we think it would benefit our economy to have a Russian military base, right, in the Lakota Nation.
Who thinks that?
I'm saying they cannot make that determination as a people. They can't say, we think it would benefit our economy to have a Russian military base in the Lakota Nation.
Well, that directly conflicts with the interests of the country that they're occupied in.
See, this is my point, that they are occupied. They're not a free people. They are subjugated people.
No. You lost. I'm sorry. You lost. That's the way it works.
What I'm saying is, no, the thing
That's
is...
the way it works. That's what there is in Israel.
There's subjugation.
You lost.
But it's not just a loss. There's a question of, did you lose and then impose your will and
do you
your
think there's
rules
justified losses and non-justified losses?
It's not a question of justified.
So Israel's a win and America's a loss?
The situation is what it is.
No, I'm asking.
But no, I'm not saying...
Is one a win and one's a loss? America? Loss? Israel? Is that a win?
No, not in its current state. But the thing is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in that objective sense.
If you take some shit that's not yours...
It's not a question of if you take something that's not yours. It's a question of, do I have to, as the person whose shit was taken, reconcile myself to that this is... The fact that this is a permanent reality that I should accept and that I'm obliged to accept. And I say, no, you did this. Okay. I don't like this arrangement. I'm going to do everything in my power to change this arrangement. And I don't feel like I should be, and I'm not in any way obliged to reconcile myself to this existing arrangement.
Now,
and so that's my
Do you think that America should pay you to fly back to wherever the fuck you think you come from, or they owe you a spot on what they took from other people?
I don't speak in terms of in America and what they took from other people. I say that it is in the interest of our people that was forged on a landmass. People didn't just move to Ohio because the weather was nice.
Definitely not.
People were a people.
Look at him. He's wearing a coat.
Right, but you had a people who were the majority population on a contiguous landmass with a common language, a common culture, a shared historical experience, a nation. A nation who, in the region in which they lived, also, not only were they the majority population, but they were the majority of the labor pool. They did the developing of the land. They were the force that drove the economy. And as a people... They had a right not just to, not just to some kind of equality within an arrangement with their former subjugators and slave masters, but a right to be self-governing. And that you never were asked and never consented to this arrangement. It was an arrangement that was imposed.
Yeah, but you can't fucking...
And so...
No, slow down. No one that was born here was subject to that.
There's a difference.
Yes. Their great-grandparents weren't brought here.
There you go. The relationship began
consensually. I get that.
Absolutely.
But, like, I don't believe, just like, if you can say that color isn't the binding thing, that Nigerians can cross an ocean, come here and be successful.
Kind of successful for the time being, because their marginal minority doesn't matter.
Come the fuck on. What do you mean kind of successful for the time being? They can come here and be successful.
They can be Americans. They can be successful Americans.
And so, you think that black people born in America can never be an American.
As a mass? No.
Fuck yes. Fuck yes, they can.
No, you can't. And not while you will have no connection to choice. I think that you could, theoretically speaking, be an American. Why? I don't think any person should aspire to it, but I think you could. I think actually New Africa, an independent New Africa, would be the first situation where a black person could really be an American, where you could make a choice to live under a government of your own or to live under the rule of the Americans. And then you have a choice to be self-governing or to be an American. Then you could have a choice. Now you have no such choice. Now you just subjugate.
Now, can I ask you a really hard question? The voice.
What?
Your voice sounds different to the point where other Africans thought that you were not from here. Why?
I don't know. I mean, even when I was a teenager, that was happening. So, I don't know. I think it could be due to, I don't know, a lot of time in libraries and less time talking, a lot of Shaka Zulu. I don't know. But it certainly was something that existed prior to me studying foreign language or something like that. I'm sure it's been...
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's something...
But, like, where the fuck did it come from?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It came from in here. It just came out. It came... But it wasn't. It certainly wasn't something where I just went in some room somewhere and made up a.
You're like, now
I would have made up.
I will make up a different voice.
I would have made a different voice.
Yeah. You know? No, I believe you.
I wouldn't have made this one, but
that was really just like.
But
I just had to make sure that there was an acknowledgement of it because we grew up in the same fucking house.
Yeah, we did.
And for the most part, I sound like I'm from here, and you do not. And I think people need to understand that
there's also this difference.
People can develop.
So I sound like, but also I spend more. Our great grandmother, I spent a lot more time with, and she's from the CI. She's from Beaufort. You know, where there were Gullah people, what they would call Geechee people.
Geechees.
You know, so I spent a lot more time.
Like you.
My grandmother. I spent a lot more time with our great grandmother than you did.
Yeah.
I spent more time in Mississippi
with all of our family,
right? You know,
than I did
in the South, in areas where there were, you know, where African retentions were stronger in some respects. So that could also have impacted it. You know, so that could be a part of it. That could be. I
like the first argument. It came from here.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, but that's where it comes from.
I think all of it's valid, but I think this is the more fun one.
But, you know, for me, I see no future for a permanent marginal minority that is thought inferior by every other population group and has, you know, and I see the trajectory.
I don't disagree with you there.
But
I see the trajectory in its current state getting worse.
It's not only getting worse, but the thing is this. What is the best case scenario under the assimilation model? Because you can never really assimilate in the sense of being, as whites are, indistinguishable from the whole, from the dominant group. You cannot assimilate. It'll be 5 generations trying.
I don't believe in the idea of absolute assimilation, where you are seen as something separate.
So what is the absolute best? So even if you got to me, even absolute equality would be inconsequential to the question of self-determination.
I think one of the worst things that ever happened was deciding that instead of Negroes or colored, that we would call black people who are raised American, African Americans. And the reason why I think it's bad, I think it's bad is because I identify as an American. And as soon as you attach a land to that other place, you attach yourself to that place, and black people don't have an actual connection to that place. Here's what I'm saying. When someone says, I'm an Irish American, they can adapt customs without any knowledge of where they're actually from in Ireland. And then be like, these are my customs. You cannot just adapt African customs. That's a continent. It's too big.
It's a continent, but...
That is not your home. That's everybody's home.
Not the same way.
Not the same way.
No.
I agree.
And so, but also, the African identity became almost so, and this is why the Pan-African identity was born in the West, largely in the diaspora. It's really where the African was born, and not the Igbo or the Xhosa or the Zulu, but the African is really exists almost exclusively in the West in that sense. Was born in the West. So
be very, very specific about that for the audience.
In this sense, so there are many nations now there are people who deny this and say all Africans are one nation. But people speaking different languages with very different lives, very different economic lives, vastly different historical experiences are not the members of a single nation.
Correct.
But we were identified as Africans in the general term Africans often. And even in our own institution. So the AME Church is not the Afro-American Church. It's the African Methodist.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So, and that wasn't a strange thing to be so identified. Because that was the general term. Because it wasn't kept what part of Africa you were from. You were an African. Just like you're a European.
Is that your favorite church?
I don't have a favorite church.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Because I don't have a favorite church.
Okay, keep going.
Churches are churches, to me. I don't have a favorite church. But, so we were African people. And I would say that never stopped. You never became an American people. You never became Americans. And the terms, and just like in the Dred Scott decision, the distinction was clear to all actual Americans and to us that they were Americans and you were not. And when people like David Walker wrote his appeal to the colored citizens of the world, the question of land was a question at that time in 1829, and the question of self-governance was a question at that time when he said, and perhaps a government of our own, in spite of what all the Americans from here into eternity think. Americans in that tract was used almost as a pejorative. The Americans. Sometimes he talked about these white Christian Americans, but there was a clear distinction to be made between us and the Americans. The people who were conquered by the Americans and the Americans. And no matter how long the subjugation was, it doesn't make you an American any more than the fact that the British ruled Ireland for 700 years almost.
No, I understand that distinction.
And they did not become British. They're not English. They're not British. They were under British rule. A separate nation.
So they were under British rule until they decided to fight.
Well, until they won the fight. Until they won a partial victory in the fight.
Instead of deciding to fight, is it fair to say that you believe that blacks or Africans decided to bargain for their rights?
No, I think they decided to fight. Many times we decided to fight. Every slave, Nat Turner wasn't trying to bargain for his rights. I know about that. Right?
Yeah,
so
slavery, fighting.
Yeah.
But once there was the Emancipation Proclamation. From that point on, it was just a battle for rights.
No. Not in the sense that the rights were not a desire. The desire for self-determination was always there. There was always a two-line struggle among our people. Those who wished to try to be Americans the best they could, and those who wanted the maximum amount of autonomy possible up to and including independence. That has always existed for all of our peoples who were enslaved in this entire hemisphere. That struggle has existed. So whether it was in Haiti, or here, that struggle has always existed. There were Haitians in the Haitian Revolution who identified with France in some respects, in revolutionary France.
You know this?
Yeah, there were those who said, no French can stay on the island. And kill all of the French. Like Dessalines said, kill the French. Toussaint, he wanted to work with the French. He died in prison. He thought he talked to Napoleon, discuss, prove relations.
You're like,
Dessalines said, kill the French. No French can stay on the island. But many blacks, in fact, most, I would say the strongest tendency in the history of our people has been the nationalist tendency, whether it was from the slave revolts or what happened in Haiti, which was so connected to our people. There's no difference in an African in Haiti and in Louisiana as far as I'm concerned. But the nationalist tendency has always endured the sense of of a separate peoplehood and rights to fight against the society and to establish something separate, I think has always existed and has been the most persistent tendency among our people. And I would say during many periods, the dominant tendency, even after not just the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed no actual slaves. It freed slaves only in territories in rebellion against the United States, which means territories the American government had no control over. There were slaves in Washington, D.C. There were slaves in territories that were under Union control that were not freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. It was a call effectively towards insurrection, so, towards, slave desertion and things of this nature. But it was only enforceable in places where they couldn't enforce it until they won a military victory and then could impose that reality. But the 13th Amendment ended slavery.
A lot of people have an issue with the 13th Amendment to this day.
Because of that. So the 13th situation, slavery, accepting situation of, accepted penal situations.
Incarceration.
That's punishment for a crime.
So if you're incarcerated, you can work at near slave wages to this day in America.
Yeah. Let's see. I think even the issue of mass incarceration, all of these things divorced from the question of national oppression, gives you So when you ask yourself what the problem is, if the problem is racism and discrimination, then the general condition of the people should be better. If that was what was ailing you, was that people discriminated against you on the basis of your race, then you should be doing better than you were doing during that period of time.
Unless some other shit has happened.
The question is, even this other shit,
like drug laws and the delusion of the fucking black family.
But the thing is, the solution, if you're saying that this thing did occur, that there were laws imposed to systematically target these things, what was it targeting? And what I'm saying that there were these things developed, right? But I'm saying they were developed because the problem was not racism. That wasn't the central problem. That the problem is that you are not an American people. That Justice Taney and every black rebel prior to Justice Taney, Nat Turner and them, they were right. That David Walker was right. To an extent, Marcus Garvey was right. That the African Blood Brotherhood were right. That you are a nation of people. And that your problem is national oppression. And that you are treating racism. But that is not what ails you. So you keep getting sick. And there'll be new symptoms. Because you have not treated the problem. It's like when I was a teenager and I had a respiratory infection. I went to Dr. Taylor. Right? And he said I had a bad cold. He kept giving me all this medicine. I'm getting sicker. Because I'm following the prescription. But based on a wrong diagnosis. So no matter what medicine I take, new symptoms come up all the time. Because I'm not addressing the actual illness that I have. So new manifestations of the actual illness that I have are breaking out and making my situation worse. Once it was determined, actually, your problem is you have a respiratory infection. Take antibiotics, and in a week, I was sick for a couple of months. Take a week, no more problems. Once you had a proper diagnosis of the problem, and you took a course of treatment based on that accurate diagnosis, then you start to see improvement. And what I'm saying is that we are not a race of people being discriminated against who just need equality and more justice in the society, but we're a nation of people being subjugated. And that the answer is not more equality, but independence. That we have a problem of national oppression, not racism, but we're taking the racism medicine. And as long as we keep taking the racism medicine, we're going to be sicker and sicker and sicker until we fucking die.
Devin?
And that we need to stop taking the racism medicine and start taking the national oppression medicine. I
agree that the racism medicine needs to go away. I'm not sure that nationalism is the answer.
So what's the downside?
But here's what I'm going to say. And we've gone 2.5 hours on this podcast.
Yeah, we're going.
We went deep.
Yeah, I would.
And I'm really glad that people got to hear your perspective on this. Because I feel like a lot of times it comes across way more racist and way more angry
because it's not
and way more bullshit.
Because it's
it's like Quanell X and like
because it is bullshit.
You know,
if you ask a nationalist anywhere in the world,
let me finish.
Go ahead, finish.
But I think people, even though I don't fucking agree with you about the nature of black people in America and whether or not we are Americans, you have some arguments that are interesting. Even to me. And if people want to know more about your arguments, how the fuck can they find you? Well, can they?
They can find the arguments in favor of independence. They can search the New African Independence Movement. But
you see that dodge? He got them slips. He hasn't boxed in a while, but he can slip them strikes. Yeah. You know, I saw Boo the other day.
Where?
Here.
Oh, I didn't know that. But just real quick, not real quick, but just
go.
With respect to this issue of, people who say that they are nationalists, but I would say they are false nationalists. The question is, I'm a person who's a nationalist and supports national liberation, which I support more than you even use the term nationalist. The national liberation movement of our people, which to me is the New African Independence Movement. Now, any other people who are nationalists all over the world, you ask them what they're fighting for, and they can tell you in one sentence. If you ask an Irish nationalist what he's fighting for, he's fighting for land and independence. He's fighting for independence from Great Britain, the unification of his country. You ask a Palestinian nationalist what he's fighting for. He's fighting for a free Palestine. His definition of it may be different depending on his faction, his political faction. But you ask, there's no other so-called nationalist movement in the world, people who call themselves nationalists, who are not fighting for a state and land and independence. So if you, to me, are a New African and you say you're a nationalist and you're not fighting for land and independence, then you're not a nationalist.
Isn't land for sale, though? Can you just buy it?
You can buy land, and I support that. But what I'm
saying
is,
why doesn't Oprah follow you?
Why don't you? No, but the thing is, I'm not a big fan of putting the celebrities on the spot in that sense. I think there are things that Oprah can do. And this is the thing that I think is so beneficial of the New African Independence Movement. Is so let's say you don't support the end objective. You doubt its feasibility. Then you could say, well, is it better to be a majority or a minority? Under American rule, let's say you're going to be
better to be a majority.
A nigger for another 400 years, right? And American rule is the be-all and end-all. It's the best you can achieve. So is it better I say there should be a remigration. We should transition our people back into the South. This would be better for us. Become the majority population again on a contiguous landmass, even while yet under American rule. Utilize those so-called rights that they have in America under American rule to strengthen the position politically of our people. And economically.
The democratic part.
The democratic aspect of things. Ultimately speaking, I think then exercise the democratic right to determine that you wish to separate. But let's say you don't want to, which is silly. But let's say you don't want to. Is it still not better? There's been less than 6 elected senators. There's been less than 10 elected senators, black senators, in the history of the United States. If we became a majority in, let's say, 4 or 5 states, you could have 8 or 10, not counting whatever odd Negro senator you might get out of Chicago, for instance, out of Illinois.
How dare you, sir?
Some out of Illinois or some other place.
That was your president.
That was your president, right?
Not mine.
You're the American. That was your American president.
No, he's my president.
Yeah, but so
as is Trump. This one.
Yeah, your president, right? And so, would it not be better than in that situation to have 10 senators at once?
Well, look,
would it not
you're
be better
smarter
to
than me.
5
I'd rather have
at
you
once?
be my president than Donald Trump.
Right, but what I'm saying, under this arrangement, by being majority, because black people are generally speaking elected and able to actually work in the interests of black people only when they're elected by black communities. Otherwise, they just are senators who happen to be black, representing the interests of the people who elect them. Right?
Yeah.
They're representatives, and largely, and so if you have black majority population on the state level, if Georgia had 5% higher black population, Stacey Abrams would be the governor of Georgia right now. Or if they had the voting laws that they had in Vermont, Stacey Abrams would be the governor of Georgia right now.
What's the difference in the voting laws?
Vermont, you can vote in prison in Vermont. And I think that's something that should be pushed. I think that's part of the Democratic strategy to lead our people out of subjugation to national self-determination. Is not only
the voting rights of prisoners,
the expansion of the democratic rights of the people within the society in general.
No.
So that's part of it.
Very specific.
Yeah, so prisoners should be able to vote.
Of prisoners.
But not just that aspect of things. But I don't think it's a coincidence that Maine and Vermont have some of the most liberal voting laws, and they also have the least amount of non-whites, basically, as part of the population.
Well,
so
once everyone looks like you, things get more liberal.
And think like you, then let them, yeah. And so my thing is that as the voting laws are lax in Vermont and Maine, that while we are forced to live under these Americans, we should still fight for the maximum democratic rights.
These Americans, you son of a bitch.
And so in the South, we have, in my opinion, what I would call neo-Confederate rule. And neo-Confederate rule can be broken within the South, but it has pillars.
What does neo-Confederate rule mean?
These are the Confederates, right? So the Confederates lost the war. They ended up winning Reconstruction. And the political parties in the South, the Republican Party in the South is the white party, the Democratic Party is the black party. They switched roles.
Yeah.
So, but party allegiance in the South is largely based on one issue and one issue alone. So Democrats who voted for the New Deal did not become fiscal conservatives, right? They didn't become small government. They switched and became Republicans on should the niggas vote. One issue alone. So they were all Democrats until the civil rights movement and Johnson supporting voting rights, things of this nature. Then they all became Republicans. And they vote largely as a monolith. So Mississippi was 40% black. What percentage of the vote you think Obama got?
What percentage?
About 40%, right? Basically every black person that voted for Obama, and basically every white person that voted didn't. Though I'm not a fan of that individual, right, of Barack Obama.
Of course not. He's an American.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the first so-called black president is not a descendant of enslaved African people. Isn't that an interesting coincidence? And that Kamala Harris, also, though she's a descendant of enslaved African people, not one that was enslaved on these shores, right? That's coincidence, I guess. I don't know. But, so by expanding democratic rights, the struggle for democratic rights in the South, a larger portion of those who have been historically disenfranchised will be able to participate in the democratic process. That it is possible to build a governing coalition led by the New African working class in the South before we become the majority in the states of Mississippi and Alabama. That if you can break 10% of the white working class from the Republican base, then you could have a governing coalition while still a minority population, where you are the overwhelming majority of that where our people are the overwhelming majority of that governing coalition. And that can be done by expanding democratic rights, for struggling to expand workers' rights in the South and women's rights in the South, and do that too.
Women's rights.
Absolutely. And that doing that is the best possibility to draw support from from people who would be opposed to independence, but who would not be opposed to breaking down these particular bastions of the neo-Confederate rule, which I would say stand in between us and independence. That once we break these things down and people actually have the benefit of exercising some measure of power over their own lives. They will then become more conscious of the limitations of that power because of the power that sits over them yet and prevents them from doing the things that would make their lives better and the lives of their children better. And we'll push towards greater autonomy and independence. And I think that can be done largely democratically. But I think as people who've been murdered for centuries by Americans, that
oh, get the fuck, come on,
get
the fuck. See, you were just about to get some new fans, and you're like, then you went straight Quanell X on these niggas.
I never have gone
you're
Quanell
like,
X, but
as people who have been systematically murdered,
we have to be prepared for the potential that our democratic expression won't be respected. And that not only will
that democratic expression may not be respected,
and that not only might it not be respected,
because you want
there will
to
be
fucking
those who seek to force
secede,
mm-hmm.
and that's not going to be respected by a lot of people.
We'll see. I think that
I'm open to seeing where it's going to go, and with that, this has probably been my favorite podcast of all time.
Been long.
I basically got to see what childhood was like in about 2.5 hours. I just saw.
What was it like?
It's that you're very polite, and when Darren wants to speak, you have to shut up. And is this the truth though? It's the truth because it's like, hey, hold on, let me say something here, and then
it's only because it's my fucking show.
I think this is how it was in real life too.
No, he could kick my ass.
Yeah.
Even though he could probably knock me out right now.
I don't know.
He just doesn't want to.
But, especially, the thing is...
He's got one good shot. Take him down. We're good. Yeah. But that shot is real. Like, you motherfuckers don't know how many right and lefts I've taken in my life.
Too many. Too many.
We love y'all. Goodbye, Internet.
Should have eased up a little bit.